Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second hearing of the committee's inquiry into unsolved murders and long-term missing persons cases in New South Wales between 1965 and 2010. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Bundjalung and Gumbanya and Yagal nations, the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are meeting today. I pay my respects to elders past and present and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I also acknowledge and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. My name is Jeremy Buckingham and I am the chair of this committee. I ask everyone in the room to please turn their mobile phones to silent. Parliamentary privilege applies to witnesses in relation to the evidence they give today. However, it does not apply to what witnesses say outside of the hearing. I urge witnesses to be careful about making comments to the media or to others after completing their evidence. In addition, the Legislative Council has adopted rules to provide procedural fairness for inquiry participants. I encourage committee members and witnesses to be mindful of these procedures. Again, to the witnesses, thank you very much for making the time to give evidence. Could each witness, starting with Ms. Cox, please state their name and swear either an oath or an affirmation, please?
Karen Cox. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you. Ms. Cox Browning?
Kathy Cox Browning. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare affirm that the evidence now and before about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cantle?
Sue Cantor, I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Would either or any of you like to make an opening statement before we turn to some questions?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Ms. Cox Browning?
Okay. Glasses. I'm here today for my sister Narelle Cox. In July 1977, at the age of 21, she became a missing person. That was 49 years ago. I was 15 at the time. Then, as it is now, speaking about this situation is difficult. We were an average working class family, raised to be honest, caring and respectful, and the lack of action and care by the authorities was devastating. I have noticed that this is no longer the case. People are still being reported missing and action is immediate. But there are still unidentified human remains sitting in a drawer waiting. Family and friends that know a missing person have a unique mindset. We all suffer from the battle with hope and logic. Hope has lasted for years, decades even, but logical brain is always nagging the truth at you. This human trait of hope makes acceptance a lifetime struggle and gives you a knowledge that there may never be closure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, would any of you like to lead off with some questions? Or, well, I've got some. Thank you very much for taking the time to come along today. In terms of what we know about Narelle, had Narelle lived in Noosa for long, or was she just travelling there to see a friend?
Yes, no, she'd never lived there. She had visited a couple of times and hitchhiked those times as well. But she used to have a big dog with her at the times except the last time.
She hitchhiked with the dog?
Yes.
And so she had hitchhiked up over the previous year or two to see friends?
3 times, I think, about 3. But just to visit her friend. She never actually lived there.
Okay. And did she hitchhike into other places, or was it just those? Was it routine for her to hitchhike?
I don't recall her hitchhiking anywhere else. I don't think there was a necessity for her to go anywhere else.
Thank you. She had planned to work in Noosa. Was she moving there long term, or was
No.
it just a visit to see a friend to catch up?
Yes, it was just a visit, just to catch up while she was actually waiting. She had been in Sydney for a while with our auntie, and then she decided she wanted to go nursing, but she wanted to see a bit of Australia, so she applied to Darwin Hospital. So she came home and she was waiting for the papers to come from Darwin Hospital. She said to our mother about 2 days before, I think I'll go and see Faye, and who was a school friend
In Noosa.
who lived in Noosa now, yes. And my mother said, how will you go? And she said, I'll hitchhike. And Mum said, no. Mum had given her $200 for her 21st birthday in March. She said, you've got the money, why don't you take the bus? But then nothing more was said until 2 days later when Mum came home from work and found the note. And all she said was, gone to Noosa to see Faye, be back Monday. And that was the only connection to Noosa.
And that note, was that definitely in Narelle's handwriting? It was definitely from her?
Yes, and then I lived not far from our parents, and my mother came round and asked me, Narelle's left this note, did you know anything about it? And I said, no, she hadn't said anything to me.
And was Narelle in any sort of relationship at that time? Did she have a boyfriend or anything like that? She was single?
She was single, yes.
Okay. And so my understanding is that your mum then went down to the post office and sent a telegram or
Yes.
to her friend in Noosa to confirm she'd been there?
She was there was a lift organised for her to come up and see me in Armidale at uni the following week, and she wasn't home and missed the lift.
Uh-huh. So it was because she hadn't gone to Noosa and then returned in a couple of
Yeah.
days that you then realised that when you didn't see that something was not awry.
Yeah,
that had gone awry.
Narelle's mother realised she should have been home.
Yes, when she didn't arrive home on the Monday,
Yep.
in those days we didn't have a telephone, so she went to the post office and sent a telegram. And on the Tuesday, I think that was the Tuesday, and the telegram came back from Faye, and all it stated was, have not seen or heard from Narelle. So it was that evening or afternoon, my mother and I went down to the police station and reported her as a missing person.
And what was the attitude of the police?
She's 21, you know, she's probably just decided to stay longer or go somewhere else, or, you know, she's 21. She can do what she likes.
So they didn't act on it? They didn't send out a search or say they were going to do anything at that time?
Nothing at that time.
Did that remain the situation? Like, what about after another week, or did you go back to the police?
Yes, my mother and I frequently went back.
When you say frequently, how often?
I'd say once a week.
Once a week, yes.
I didn't always go, but my mother went at least once a week. And then it was about 6 weeks after she left that the police actually put a notification in our local paper, the Daily Examiner. And then a couple of days after that, a fisherman at Lawrence in the Clarence River, while fishing, pulled up his anchor and thought he'd pulled up a body. The police diving team from Sydney was brought up, and they did 2 days diving. I think 2 days, you know.
Where's Lawrence from Grafton? How far away is that? Is it on the Clarence River?
Yes, it is, yes. It's where there's a ferry goes across to an island, yeah.
20 minutes drive.
Yep.
Yeah. And
So a person thought they'd seen a body, concerned enough they went to the police.
yes,
My understanding is they thought the person had the deceased person had blonde hair.
yes, that's right.
Did Narelle have blonde hair?
No, she didn't. She did have a blonde streak down, a face. But no, so they where he said he was, it's a fishing spot and it's a very deep hole apparently in the river. And the divers didn't find anything. And my mum and my auntie actually went and interviewed the fisherman, and he then said to them, "Oh, I don't think it was Narelle because the person had blonde hair." So that's where that came from. A lot of people said he drinks a lot. If he did that, that probably is not true. But equally, a lot of people said if he said that, it happened. So we don't really know much more.
Do you know if the police interviewed him or
Yes.
he gave a statement to the police?
Well, I believe so because it was in the paper, pictures of the diving and etc.
And the diving didn't bring up any
No.
result.
No.
Um, there was a report that a truck driver had allegedly picked Narelle up from South Grafton Crossroads and given her a lift to Brunswick Heads. Is that true? How was that established?
We don't know. The police came and told us that when we were down there at some stage. And my mother asked, could she speak to this truck driver? But the police refused. No, he doesn't want to be identified.
So a truck driver had come forward, or they
So they said.
So they said.
Yep.
So that was the police that told you that a truck driver said he had picked Narelle up
Yep.
from South Grafton
Yep.
Crossroads
Yep.
and dropped her at Brunswick Heads
Fish co-op. Yep.
Fish Co-op north of Byron Bay.
Yep.
And that was all you were told, with
That's
no
all.
outcome about whether or not he was interviewed, who he
No.
was,
No.
all the rest.
No, that was the only thing that was said, no, he doesn't want to be identified.
And did they tell you how they'd established that he'd picked her up?
No.
You never
We've
told.
had a report that a truck driver picked her up at South Grafton and dropped her off at the fish co-op at Brunswick Heads.
Did they give you dates or times or anything like that? So
No.
they wouldn't tell you who he was,
No,
like anything about him,
nothing.
or where he dropped, like when he dropped her off, all the rest?
No.
No, nothing.
No.
Was any search ever conducted around Brunswick Heads for Narelle that you know of?
No, I don't think so. Now, I can't quite remember times, but at one time the police did tell us that, because we said, she was going to Noosa, and they did say that they would notify all the police stations from Grafton to Noosa. And I just can't remember. It was weeks, probably a couple of weeks after she'd left. Mum, me, Kathy, we went for a drive and we stopped off at every little shop along the way, showing Narelle's photo, see if anybody had recognised her, and there was nothing. And then when we got to Brisbane, we weren't sure what to do, so we went to a police station, and I can't remember where it was, and asked them if they knew anything about it. They'd never been notified. We found out since that New South Wales and Queensland, or New South Wales and Victoria, didn't interact.
So this was some weeks after, just a few weeks after Narelle had disappeared. You took it upon yourself to drive to Queensland to look for her.
Yeah.
How long?
We didn't go any further because we thought, well, there's not much point because they don't know anything about it.
How long after Narelle's disappearance was the truck driver incident? Was that just weeks after or months after?
No, weeks. It was all within weeks, and then it went to nothing.
Okay.
We did take We took a description of what Narelle took with her, including a guitar and X-rays. She'd broken her nose playing hockey, and we had X-rays. We took those to the police. And in the coroner's inquiry a few years back, none of that evidence was ever found. Like, nobody knows what happened to it.
So tell us about between the, is that really where the sort of trailed off?
Yes.
What did you then hear from the police over those intervening years? When was the coronial inquest?
I can't remember dates. I've got a thing in my car with.
I think it was
In the
2011.
2000s.
So between 1977 and 2011, so 33 years, how much contact did you have with the police?
About 1 year later, Mum was still at work, but I was at our family home. Two young policemen came to the door and knocked on the door, and I answered it, and they said, "Oh, we've found Narelle." I said, "Oh my God, where is she?" "Oh, she registered for unemployment in Sydney." Oh, well, we're so excited. Anyway, when Mum came home and I told her, she more or less immediately booked a train, went to Sydney because she had a sister in Sydney, and her and her sister went to the unemployment office that the police had said, and because of the circumstances, they really shouldn't have, but they did look up the file, and it was the year before when Narelle was living in Sydney. But
So the police had got that wrong.
they had got that wrong. And after that, there was no further contact
Where did Narelle live in Sydney?
with our auntie,
Yes, and whereabouts?
Epping.
Epping. And was she down there long?
About 6 months, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that, apart from the police knocking on your door and giving you some incorrect information, about a year later,
Yep.
did you have much contact from the police?
No,
Any contact from the police?
no. It didn't seem to be much point because they just kept saying, "No, there's nothing new."
So you've had no contact with the police since then?
Not till the coroner's.
Right.
So
Yeah.
for 34 years.
I have.
You have?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell, yep.
First of all, it was probably about 6 weeks later. I was living in Armidale, and the head detective from the Armidale police force, who we all had heard of, came to the house, but he didn't come in the front fence at all. He just stopped at the fence, and I went out to see what he wanted, and he just wanted to reassure me that the police are friendly, and if I heard anything about Narelle, not to hesitate to come in to the police and let them know, and which never heard anything. And then again, I think it was about 2004 or maybe a little bit before that, I got a phone call from somebody, I don't remember his name, policeman, who said they were sort of going back over cold cases, and he questioned me about Narelle's case, and he asked me he said, "I can't find an official record of interview with you." And I said, "No, there wasn't one, just talked over the fence." And he asked me other questions, and he was horrified, really. He said to me, "It's just terrible." He said that investigation was never done, It should have been chased up. And now it's a long time later.
That was 27 years later after she disappeared.
Yes, so yeah.
That you got a call from. Did he say like how the case was being reinvestigated or why?
Lots of them are being reinvestigated. Actually, the person I shared my house with had a missing brother, and he got a call also.
At that same time?
Yeah, so they clearly were going through old cold cases to see if they just revisiting them. Probably a change in attitude from the police. Yeah.
And did any other, and that was just you? Did other family members get
Yes,
contacted
I'm
as well?
sorry,
and told the same thing.
I had forgotten that. But yes,
okay, Mrs. Scott.
Detective Burke, I think it was. He was very good. He
Yeah.
came and the same thing. And then he also was involved with the coroner's thing too, the same detective, because I remember now that he'd come again after, and I hadn't seen him for years in between. Yes, he came again and said similar things. They were looking into it.
And in 2000, of course, Ivan Milat was arrested in 1994. Were you or did any family members ever contact the New
Yes.
South Wales Police in relation to Ivan Milat and where he may or may not have been at that time? Can you tell us about that?
Yes. When Ivan Milat was arrested and Task Force Air, I think it was called, I rang the number and I spoke to a detective. I told him Narelle's circumstances, and I was just wondering whether Ivan Milat could have been involved. And he said, "Oh, well, look, I'll just check on that and I'll get back to you in 10 minutes." And I said, "Okay." And I thought, that's that. But they did ring me back almost to the 10 minutes. And he said, "We've looked up Narelle's date of disappearance, and in correspondence with Ivan Milat's work record, he was supposedly working on the roads in Newcastle at that time." And that was all. That was the end of that. But
And so therefore he was ruled out.
yes, he was ruled out.
So you call them, 10 minutes later they call you up and say,
Yes.
"We've checked his work records, he couldn't have done it."
Yes,
And that was in like 10 or 15 minutes,
Yes.
to your recollection.
yeah.
Were you ever told that Narelle had been on a list of cases that the Task Force Air had already reviewed as being potentially sharing similarities to the Belangolo murders? Were you ever told that?
No,
Or you never that information was never passed on to you?
no. That was
And that was the last contact you ever had with Task
Yes.
Force Air?
yes.
There was a coronial inquest in November 2011. How did that come about? Were you told why it was happening, or will you just get a contact, an email or a phone call from the coroner saying that was happening?
No, Detective Burke came and told me.
So this is the detective that had called you in 2004, 2005, thereabouts. He said
Yeah.
that there was a coronial inquest happening 7 or 8 years later.
Yes.
And can you tell us about that coronial inquest?
Um,
Was there any new information provided
No.
there, or
no, I had the thing in my car with the results of it, but I didn't bring it up.
Yep, okay. Were there any persons of interest mentioned there? Did the police provide any new information?
No, not.
But you have been provided with a copy of the results
Yes.
of that. Would you be prepared to share that with the committee?
Yes, I can go and get it.
No, you don't have to do it right now, Mrs. Cox. That's fine. Just in due course, the Secretariat will be in contact with you. Colleagues, do you have any questions? Yes, Mrs.
Thank you.
McDonald.
Thank you for coming along today. I'm just wondering, like if you look,
Sorry, I can't.
sorry, if you look back over, say, since your sister's disappearance, what do you want most for the committee to understand about that disappearance?
I think that the committee and probably everybody understands it's not just the person who disappears. It destroyed our mother. She used to come to me sometimes and say, "I've got this terrible feeling in my chest that Narelle somewhere needs me," and she wasn't a dramatic, emotional sort of person. It was just heartbreaking to hear it. And she tried everything she could, and when I show you my things, she'd contacted the Salvation Army because they had a missing persons section, and they inquired as far as they could and then sent a letter back and said, we can't do any more. Mum put an ad in the Courier Mail in Brisbane. You know, there were so limited things that we could do in those days.
And other news departments weren't interested in the story at all.
She went to Current Affair.
And
They didn't want.
So we know what it means, but it'd be good that future people get satisfaction through the authorities that they are doing everything they can to find a missing person.
yeah,
And it is very important to start straight away, not weeks, months later.
yeah. So that was going to be my next question. Is there anything that you would like to have happened, say, or that you could say for another family that you believe should never happen? Sorry. So what happened in your case is saying you should act quicker, and about the communication side of things.
And it doesn't matter how old they are. Like, yeah, the police thought 21, she's in that old. Doesn't matter. It does matter, because the people that know her knew she wasn't going to disappear for no reason. There was a reason behind it. And sometimes, children disappear and it's terrible and that they get immediate things, but sometimes older people, they think they've just wandered off or they've just gone off, but it doesn't matter. A missing person needs the same amount of coverage and investigation as anyone else.
And you mentioned I think in your opening statement, Ms. Cox, that you believe it's changed now to what it was.
Yes, yeah. I see it now, like on Facebook. I see I get notifications that someone's missing in the area, and straight away, it's good. It's what needs to be done.
You mean via text message or something like that?
It's some sort of police notification I get. I don't know why I get them. I
think
they just come out
Everyone
I see them, and I think, wow, that's really good nowadays. It's keeping people informed, letting people know that this still is happening. Like back when my sister disappeared, there was very little media coverage of it. That's why it was a field day for anyone who wanted to go out and commit crimes. They just weren't followed up. So yes, it's good that it is followed now, and there's more emphasis on trying to locate and find them. Sometimes people never get found, even now with all the social media and coverage it gets, they still can't find them. So it is sad, and then there's another generation of more families that have to go through the not knowing.
So that was. So what has been the most difficult part of living with that uncertainty? Because as you say, it wasn't just Norelle. It's your whole family. It's
and friends. Sue's known her for school days, and there's still people from Norelle's school days that bring it up and say, we still miss her. And
very often.
Yeah, and next year, 50 years. Yeah, it's a long time.
It's a long time.
Mm.
Just recently, one of Norelle's school friends died, and during the funeral, Norelle's name was mentioned because it was one of her memories before she died. And so that's such a unique sort of thing, One other thing I wanted to comment on too was that as far as we know, Faye Brown was never interviewed, and we never heard any more from Faye Brown.
They didn't do any interviews. I wasn't technically interviewed.
No,
No, it wasn't.
Remind us who Faye Brown was.
she was the friend
friend
that
from
Norelle
Newsom.
was going to visit in Newsom, but because the states didn't pass information in between the states that went.
But no New South Wales police officer that you know of ever went to Queensland to interview.
No.
At the coronial inquest, did you attend that? Was that
No, it was in Coffs Harbour, and I can't remember why we were going, but something happened. I can't remember now why.
were you ever sent like a transcript of it? Like in terms
Yes.
of being told you were sent the whole transcript of it?
Yes, I have it in the car.
And did the truck driver issue come up, like who that truck driver was, or was that information included in the coronial inquest?
No,
So that part, the person who says that they picked Narelle up
yeah,
and had come forward, or the police had learnt that they'd picked them up, they weren't mentioned at the coronial inquest.
no.
Was there any mention of a search of Brunswick Heads or the police conducting, inquiries in Brunswick Heads, her potentially last known location? Was that mentioned?
Look, I'm not. I'd have to go through it again.
Yeah, sure,
I just
I
can't
understand.
remember. I'm old.
I had another thing happen. It was just before COVID. I had when we had a celebration 40 years since Narelle disappeared, so it's nearly 10 years ago, and we were interviewed for the local paper, and it was a really huge coverage. And just before COVID, a journalist who was writing about, and he said, "Google me, I'm legit," and he was getting a podcast together, and he picked me out because he said there's not many people with your name. I knew I'd be able to find you and track me down. And I told him that Kathy and Karen would also be worth talking to, and he was doing a podcast on a particular criminal who's in jail actually at the time, and he said he was coming up to interview me, but we all got locked down and nothing ever happened of it because we were locked down for a long time. But he said to me, in his opinion, there is another culprit who should be looked into, who was operating in the northern part of the state. I can't remember his details, but he was he was a likely lad. He said she might have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He committed all sorts of assaults, rapes, murders, and finally made a mistake, and they got him for a murder in Sydney and three murders in Sydney and one in Melbourne.
Was it Ashley Colston?
That's the guy. I didn't
The
know if I could
balaclava
say.
killer. Yeah.
Yes, and he said he wanted to interview me about that. He said, and I thought, well, he's there. He could be questioned again, couldn't he? About things, but don't know. They don't cough up, I don't think. But that was interesting.
When you say they don't cough up, you mean that the police never tell you who?
No, I
who
mean
they're
the
looking at or
criminals.
why?
The criminals don't
Oh, right,
bother
okay.
admitting to other things. I don't think, but I have read a bit about him, and there was a lull in his criminal activity, and they said it's very unlikely he was doing nothing, and that was Narelle's disappearance fell into that little time.
I think he lived at Kyogle too.
Yes, he did, and apparently he used to go camping on the weekends, and jeez, I turned it off.
Always the way.
Okay.
And they said they just thought there was something suspicious about his camping trips on the weekends, and then things would go wrong, and there were a couple found dead on the beach at Kingscliff, and that they never solved, and other things going on around that area.
That's the murder of Carol Dow up at Kingscliff.
Yeah, I'm not sure their names. Yeah.
That was 1977 as well, I think.
Yes. And then,
And this was a podcaster.
yeah, it was a journalist who was going to write a podcast because he suspected this fellow was operating out there and that Narelle might have been one of his victims.
Can I ask, what's your attitude to, the media inquiries? I know it's an incredibly difficult subject, but how have you always felt about media approaching you to talk about it, or in fact this inquiry? Is it something you think is helpful, or is it, would you prefer?
Yes.
Of course, you prefer not to be doing it.
No, I don't. I appreciate doing it. Yeah, I appreciate the interest, and after all these years, you don't expect an outcome, but it's good that it gets looked into, and I hope that the police these days take things seriously.
One of the things you said early on was that you said that there's a lot of remains. I think we've been told there's hundreds of remains that are stored in. Have you ever been asked for DNA?
Yes, we're
Yes.
here a couple of
It was
years.
before COVID. Both Karen and I went down, supplied DNA to the police.
And
They
What
had-
do you mean? What do you mean? Can you
they went-
describe that?
They invited us down because they were taking DNA for this particular missing people to tidy up the human remains that they have there. This was down in Coffs Harbour. We went, and we gave them a sample, and
And who's they? The coroner?
the police.
It was
The police.
Force, wasn't
yeah,
it?
it was apparently they said there was some money granted to them for this, and so they did all these DNA, and we've never heard another word since.
That was it.
That was it.
You went down. You provided your DNA because they were going to. You were told that was to
And it-
compare against
it was
human
the-
remains that they had unidentified, but then no result.
And it was the first time that it was Australia-wide. They were going to DNA test any remains from Australia-wide. But we've never heard another word.
And there was that New South Wales Police or the Federal Police. Do you recall?
I thought it was New South Wales police.
Okay,
Can I just add,
sure.
I can remember little bits. The day Narelle disappeared, the day she left, I said my mother had given her $200 for her 21st birthday, and she went to the Commonwealth Bank and deposited that money before she left, and that bank account was never ever touched. And that was another thing that we told the police. So to me, people didn't have access to money except,
And would she have routinely carried a lot of cash with her?
no.
Just a few dollars.
Yeah.
And did I know it's hard for you to remember. Did the coroner make any findings on not clearly not about the cause of death, but on a time of that she is deceased, or that when she may have become deceased?
I can't remember. I'd have to look at it again, but I'm sure it said that likely death.
But no time.
I think it was not long after she disappeared.
Yeah,
It wasn't
something like that.
It wasn't,
Okay.
It was basically someone took her and probably.
And relatively soon. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I appreciate that. It's hard to recall. Colleagues, do you have any other questions?
Thanks, Chair. I've got a few.
Yeah,
Tonight.
Mr. Lawrence.
Thanks so much for assisting the inquiry and coming along. My first question is there any other understandings that you've got of possible shortcomings of the police investigation that you'd be able to share with us? You've obviously talked about you, Sue, not being interviewed, and talked about the police not acting soon enough, perhaps, and perhaps assuming that because Narelle was 21, she was just doing her own thing or whatever. But is there any other specific sort of issues or concerns that have come to your attention about things that you feel should have been done, perhaps that weren't done?
I think mainly the part that the states don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
They didn't back then. I'm not sure what the procedure is now. But I think that was the biggest hurdle that was reported in Grafton Police Station. It didn't go anywhere else until much, much later, and by then it was too late. That was the biggest one, I think.
And I think it was only that my mother kept going to the police station that they eventually put the ad in the local paper. But I don't know that it went to any other papers.
And in terms of ongoing contact with the police over the years, have you felt that you've had someone that you're able to contact in the police? Have you felt that that contact is appropriate and sort of, open to you?
Well, I found Detective Burke, I'm pretty sure that's his name.
Yeah.
He was very, very understanding. I couldn't fault him.
Yeah.
He didn't hide anything back. He's the one told us that all the evidence had disappeared and, all that sort of thing. I was quite happy with his representation. And apart from that, I've not had anything to do with police.
No.
And in terms of disappearing evidence, was he talking about the evidence that was obtained by the police back in the 1970s?
That we supplied.
Okay, but that's all disappeared.
Yeah,
is it?
because when I said to him, we supplied this, and the description and what she was wearing and the guitar she had with her and the bag and none of that. He couldn't find anything like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's something that I'm aware of in quite a few criminal trials even. Evidence is lost before the trial and they're not available for the trial. Did the police give you any more information about whether that had been destroyed as part of standard police procedure or had it simply gone missing? Did you get any insights into that?
I could only say that he couldn't find anything. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so he didn't tell you whether that was like something that had occurred deliberately or accidentally?
No, not that I recall.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of the possible involvement of Ivan Milat, is that something that you've got any more information that you'd like to share with us in terms of theories that you might have developed or understandings or things that you've been told?
The only thing that Ivan Milat apparently had been in Grafton Jail and had been released from Grafton Jail at one stage. This is only things I've been told. I don't know. I don't have evidence of it.
True, he
And
was.
at the time Narelle disappeared, it was our July racing carnival here in Grafton, which is a big famous racing carnival. And he would have probably been aware of that. And also I have heard since that even though they said he was working on the roads in Newcastle at the time, that he often got other people to sign his name in and when he wasn't even there. So
I've heard that's common for people to do that.
Yeah.
and that's the only thing about Ivan Milat, but yeah.
Can I ask, in 2004 and up to the coronial inquest in 2011, did Detective Burke, as you recall, did he ever mention people of interest or any discussions about people that they'd ruled in or ruled out, like either Ivan Milat or Ashley Coulston or people like this? He didn't
Not to me.
say we're looking at this through a particular lens?
No.
No.
Me either, no. He was just, with me, he was surprised that there was no interview and not much follow-up at all. Couldn't believe that he talked to me over a fence and that was the extent of police involvement, because she was intending to come up to visit me, and so you'd wonder.
Well, look, thank you very much. That concludes our questions and the time we've allocated for you. We deeply appreciate, like, our condolences to you, deepest sympathies and condolences. We deeply appreciate you coming along to talk to the inquiry and share your story. It's been enormously informative. The Secretariat will be in contact in due course. We'd love to see what the coronial inquest had to say, and of course, if there's any questions you've got, please contact the Secretariat. The process from here is we're going to continue our hearings. We'll probably be writing a report, but this has been absolutely fun, really important to us. We deeply appreciate you coming along and sharing your story today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Hondos, thank you very much for your attendance today. Before we proceed to hearing from you, we just need to start by getting you to please state your name and swear either the oath or affirmation. And I'll start with you, Miss Layden.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. Thank you for having us. I'm taking the oath today. So I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much, Ms. Qantas.
Hello, Joni Kondas. I'm going to do the affirmation. I solemnly and sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much.
you.
Do you have an opening statement you'd like to make before we go to questions?
It's a little long, so I'm going to hopefully
Take all the time you
Okay,
need. We've got 45 minutes,
Okay.
and we definitely have some questions. So,
Okay, yes, I have taken that into
and
consideration.
you can both make one if you'd like to.
Yes,
So, Miss
thank you.
Layden.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak today, for helping bring a voice to those of us living with a missing loved one. My name is Sally Layden, and I am the daughter of long-term missing person Marion Barter. On the 22nd of June 1997, my mum stepped aboard a bus in Southport on the Gold Coast and travelled to Brisbane International Airport for what she was describing as a trip of a lifetime. My mum has never been seen again since. Her passport re-entered Brisbane International Airport on the 2nd of August 1997 under a new name, Florabella Natalia Marion Ramakel. That passport expired in 2007 and was never reported leaving Australia again, marking the start of what has become a living nightmare for the past 29 years for me. My mum does matter. For me, For me, today marks the 23rd anniversary of my grandfather's passing, my mum's dad. He'd been diagnosed with bone cancer not long before my mum went overseas, and sadly he died a few years later, never knowing what happened to his eldest daughter. It was October 18th, 1997, when my mum missed calling my brother for his birthday, which was very out of character. Worried, my friend suggested that I call her bank to see if she was using her bank account. At first, the teller told me she couldn't tell me anything due to privacy. Then asked me, "Did you say your mum's overseas?" Yes. She alerted me at that point that $5,000 every day for 3.5 weeks was being withdrawn out of my mum's bank account in Byron Bay and Burleigh Heads on the Gold Coast. A short time after my partner and I attended Byron Bay Police Station, I received a call from a man whom I believe to be the same police officer I had spoken to only days prior, telling me that they had located my mum and she didn't want anyone to know where she was or what she was doing. There is no record of this call on police files. I told my grandfather. Unsatisfied with New South Wales Police response, he sought help elsewhere. After hearing a radio segment about missing persons in Queensland, he reached out to the Salvation Army Missing Persons. The Salvation Army worked in conjunction with Queensland Missing Persons Unit at this time. March 2019, the night before the Lady Vanishes podcast launched, I received an email from my cousin which included a scanned copy of a handwritten note and letter from the Salvation Army, which stated that he stated that they had found when cleaning up my grandparents' home. After only 9 days investigating, they told him in this letter that bank security confirmed it was definitely your daughter Marion who went into the bank, withdrew all of her money and spoke of starting a new life, and that bank security are like the police. They told him there was nothing further that police could do and suggested he hire a private investigator and start in Byron Bay. My grandparents both died believing what the Salvation Army had told them in that letter. Seemingly, the Salvation Army believed what the police had told them. Through the inquest, we learnt that this information about my mum starting a new life was told to police by a bank teller, who to this day remains unidentified, as no records of who this bank teller was ever recorded, what branch they worked at, or what date this took place. No physical sighting by police. They never spoke to my mum to confirm that she was in fact safe and well. All third-hand information they took as fact regarding my missing mother. Because both New South Wales and Queensland Police both believe my mum was missing by choice, the required P79B form was not done for the coroner until 2019, 22 years later, despite notes throughout my mum's file from the coroner's office requesting this. This form is required to be sent to the coroner's office 12 months after a person is missing and they have not made contact with their next of kin. An inquest into my mum's disappearance commenced 24 years after I walked into Byron Bay Police Station, telling the desk sergeant that something was wrong. Every police officer and Salvation Army personnel who touched my mum's case, who was called to give witness testimony, was asked did they ever speak or cite to my mother, and they all said no. Not one of them could confirm that my mum was safe and well, and that it is actually her who came back to Australia, was withdrawing large sums of money from her bank account daily in Byron Bay and Belly Heads while she was supposed to be overseas, having a trip of a lifetime. Queensland Police told my grandfather that my mum had withdrawn all the funds and closed her account. This was not true. On the 31st of December 1997, my mum's account was closed and the balance of $14,887.70 was moved to unclaimed funds, whilst her other bank account attracted the monthly account keeping fees for the next 27 years. Knowing she had sold her home, packed up all her belongings in a shipping container, left her car with me, she had no fixed address of residence, no independent transport, and none of her precious belongings. We were left with Queensland Police telling my grandfather to get a PI and start in Byron Bay. No action, no care, no responsibility, all due to other work priorities. In 2002, my only brother took his own life, believing what we had been told, that our mum chose to leave us and never wanting to see us ever again. I can't express clearly enough. Your words do matter. I'm now 53 years old. I'm a wife and mother of 3. My eldest daughter is now the same age I was in 1997. It has taken me months to dredge myself through 29 years of reliving poor wording, assumptions, accusations, silence, and unverified misinformation. My written submission is 43 pages long, and I don't apologise for that. It is difficult to summarise nearly 3 decades of what has transpired, the loss I have experienced, the inaction and the assumptions. I see this opportunity to speak the truth about what I, as the daughter of a missing person, has endured, with the hope that other people are finally opening up and listening, recognising the failures to help bring about necessary changes required. This parliamentary hearing was approved to go ahead on the 15th of October last year. That date has now huge significance for me and my mum's case, being that was the date that New South Wales State Coroner Therese Rose Sullivan declared that my mum died in 1997. On this day, $80,000 was electronically transferred from my mum's bank account to an unknown account. Put simply, police failed to get the record detailed about where that money was transferred to and to whom. This information was available when they learnt about the $80,000, but instead they assumed it was transferred overseas to buy a new house with a new partner, as suggested on the police file. If we knew where her money went, I might not be sitting here today talking to you all 29 years later. There has been no digital footprint of my mum ever since. My mum was not placed on the New South Wales Missing Persons Register till 2007, after I contacted the AFP. That's 10 years later. She was never placed on the Australian Missing Persons Register until I went public with a podcast in 2019 and started a petition which raised over 30,000 signatures. Joni Kondos, who sits beside me today, found me through the Lady Vanishes podcast. Now with 25 million listeners, Joni was one who very early on heard my calls for help. When police continued to tell me their hands were tied, the investigation was as good as it was going to get, they were wrong to make those assumptions. Within 6 weeks of the podcast launching, Joni, drawing on her own lived experience with a missing family member, utilised her skills she had previously used to find her husband's great-grandmother. In doing so, she found a Lonely Hearts ad placed by an F. Ramakel, a polyglot, non-smoker, non-drinker, seeking love or marriage with a PO box in Lennox Head and a phone number. This ad in the Le Courrier Australien was the catalyst for the new investigation into my mum's disappearance. In July 2019, when the case was handed over to another detective for fresh eyes to run over everything, I was told they wouldn't find anything because the previous officer had done a really thorough job. Yet within 6 months, homicide detectives found a driver's licence in Queensland where my mum was residing before she disappeared, belonging to a Fernand Nicholas Marie Ramakel, who turned out to be the same man who admitted to writing the Lonely Hearts ad in the newspaper in 1994, a married man looking for love and potential marriage. It is reported that New South Wales Police attempted to try and locate the owner of the phone number in the ad that Joni had found, but claimed Telstra did not hold records that after 7 years and they were unable to make that connection. Another listener of the Lady Vanishes podcast, who also is here today, heard us discussing this and went to Ballina Local Library, where he hand scanned over 6,000 phone records in the 1997 phone books available. From there, he was able to identify the phone number linking the address and business name. An ABN search provided him with the information that led us to a local coin dealer and his business, Ballina Coin Investments. Unbeknown to us at the time, police had also identified this man. Known publicly as Rick Blum, it's alleged he has used 53 aliases, has been granted 10 Australian passports in different names, a Belgian national living here since the 60s. In his first interview with New South Wales Police in 2020, they asked him if he knew my mum, and he said no. The next day, he admitted not only to having my mum, but in fact having a secret affair with her in the months leading up to her selling her home and going overseas. He was called to give evidence at my mum's inquest, being on the stand for 9 days, the coroner referring to him as a person of significant interest. The police took 13 years to identify that my mum had legally changed her name through the Supreme Court in Brisbane to Florabella Natalia Marion Ramakel 1 month before she disappeared. It is important to mention that I was not privy to my mum's personal information due to strict privacy laws in Australia, despite my endless attempts to find more information that I believe would have greatly assisted me in the search for my mum. It took me going to an inquest, the coroner declaring my mum deceased so I could apply for a death certificate, so I could then apply for a grant of probate to allow me, as my mum's next of kin, to be able to ask these questions about information about my missing mum, to act on her behalf. It's been another 852 days since the coroner handed down her findings. My push for my mum's reward to be increased to $1 million was approved earlier this year, and a press conference held at police headquarters on May 4th. There, Detective Superintendent Joe Dowie was questioned by the media regarding what further action had been taken since the coroner placed my mum back with unsolved homicide for ongoing investigation. He replied, "No, that Rick Blum has exercised his right to silence." On the 11th of June this year, I watched the live first hearing of this inquiry, and that was held in Bowral, where Detective Superintendent Joe Dowie represented New South Wales Police. I was shocked to learn of his team of 125 officers working in homicide. Only 36 detectives make up the New South Wales Unsolved Homicide team for the entire state. 3 inspectors, 6 sergeants, and the remaining are investigators responsible for 750 unsolved homicides, still sitting on their books, dating all the way back to the 70s. Each case, he said, quote, is a one-man show, a really slow burn, that 30 cases are still being worked on at the moment, and that since 2008, they have resolved 32 cases, which he said was significant for us. Alarming as this was, it gave me a lot of perspective to the current day. Houston, we have a problem. To hear my mum likely died 3 days before my brother's birthday that she missed calling him for, 5 days before I walked into Byron Bay Police Station 27 years ago, telling the police officer I was worried that something was wrong, is absolutely devastating. Whilst waiting to enter the coroner's court for the last time, February 29, 2024, I was told that by the Unsolved Homicide team that my mum's case was open but inactive, that they have 800 cases and they need to prioritise, and I felt it was shelved again. After the inquest, we learnt through Google that after the inquest in New South Wales, Unsolved Homicide are not required to conduct any new information for 5 years unless new information emerges. And as they say, they are not actively looking for any new information, so this largely falls back to the families to keep pushing for anyone who knows anything to come forward through social media, to keep needing to expose ourselves and our family to the world through media. All the while, we're worried about upsetting police by doing our own investigations, contaminating witnesses who reach out to us with new information. I do have a little bit more to say, but I think I'll pause there and I can probably answer some questions.
No, that's fine. Ms. Condos, do you have anything to say?
Sure.
Or an introductory statement you'd like?
Yes, I do, yeah. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Joni Condos. I'm a registered social worker with more than 20 years' experience in crisis intervention and family violence. I speak to you today not only as a professional but as a private citizen and a member of this community who has become personally involved in the search for Marion Barter, a woman who vanished in 1997 and has never been found. In 2019, I heard about Marian's case through a podcast, as Sally said. And sitting at home one evening on the couch, unwell, I located a Lonely Hearts ad in a French-Australian newspaper under the surname Ramical. The very name Marian had changed her name to just 5 weeks before she disappeared. I submitted this to Crime Stoppers immediately because I could see the actual significance of this find. I heard nothing, absolutely nothing. The lead sat untouched for nearly 2 years. It should not take a random person such as myself in 2 states away to identify a person of interest in a cold case. But it did. That is the truth of the matter. And it tells us that something important about how these long-term missing persons cases are being managed, that was the reality of the situation. Marian was treated as an occurrence only. This is the same category as a stolen letterbox or car or bin. For 10 years, proof of life checks were run in the wrong name because they did not realise that her passport was actually in her new name. Her case was closed in 2011 based on assumptions, as Sally said, never on a confirmed sighting. And the state coroner herself later found that this was handled incorrectly. The man who wrote that Lonely Hearts ad is known as Rick Bloom. He was born in Belgium in 1939, entered Australia illegally in 1974 using his brother's passport, obtained Australian citizenship fraudulently, and has operated under at least 51 known aliases over 5 decades here in Australia. Among them are Frederick de Hedevery, Richard Lloyd Westbury, Willie David Coppenole, and Rich Richard. He has an extensive criminal history in Europe, including a 4-year prison sentence in France. He admitted at the coronial inquest to having a covert relationship with Marian in the months before she disappeared and housing her precious belongings in tea chests in his home. Marian's savings were withdrawn near his property in northern New South Wales. The state coroner found that he has further knowledge of Marian's disappearance and is deliberately withholding it. 4 other women came forward at the inquest with near identical accounts of fraud, theft, coercive control and manipulation at his hands, spanning 40 years and multiple countries. The sole charge ever brought against him in Australia was for stealing a pair of shoes. That is the full extent of his accountability under Australian law. Marian is still missing, and the coroner has found that he knows more. I want this committee to understand what it costs a family when the system fails them and the media becomes their only option. Sally Layden has spent years having to offer journalists something new to keep the story alive. That is deeply unfair and re-traumatising position to put any person in. Going public has also meant opening up her life to trolls, fantasists, people who feel entitled to know every private detail of her grief. I have personally been stalked and slandered myself as a result of this case, and my husband has actually had to increase security in our home. Media involvement also put Sally in an impossible position. So what actually happened was we got a bit caught between the podcast and the media wanting information, but we were also gagged in relation to the brief of evidence. So we were having to sort of play that middle line between 2 worlds in a way, as when the coronial inquest was happening. As you've seen in this case, skilled volunteer researchers can make a real difference in propelling cases forward. As a community member, I'm asking this committee to consider 3 things. So firstly, legislate a national register of missing persons and unidentified remains, as is overseas, UK and the US specifically. So we currently have colleagues of mine, Australian volunteer researchers, who actually work overseas on cases because there is not the capability here in Australia to do it. So they go overseas and use their skills on non-Australian related cases. So secondly, I would like to see an establishment of a formal framework for collaboration between police and skilled researchers. So at the moment, we're doing this work with no structure, no guidelines, and no feedback. So just looking at this case, for example, the sheer number of hours that have been put in by myself and many other researchers in this space, there is absolutely no way that the police would be able to fund just the pure level of travel, research, hours that have gone into getting where we are today with this case. I would also like to suggest reviewing all unidentified remains buried in unmarked graves across New South Wales. This was something that also came out as part of the research into Marion's case, that it's not just the holdings that are within the actual facility themselves, but there are unmarked graves all across New South Wales which do hold people with no DNA, dental or any other kind of record. So what is actually happening with that? Marion Barter was a teacher, a mother, a sister and someone's daughter. Her family spent nearly 30 years without answers, often fighting the very system that should have been fighting for her. As a member of the Australian community, I'm asking you to do what the system has not, to take this seriously, act with urgency, and to ensure that no other family has to go through what Sally Layden and her family have endured. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your evidence today. That's very compelling, incredibly useful. And thank you very much for your comprehensive submission to the inquiry that lays, both of you, which lays out this, egregious case. We'll now turn to some questions.
Yeah, I've got a few.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for
Mr.
coming
Lawrence.
along. It's just an extraordinary story and amazing the work that you've done, both of you. I wanted to ask you firstly, why is Mr. Blum still an Australian citizen, given that he had been incarcerated in Belgium, lied on his application to come to Australia, came here on a false passport, and is now been living on social security benefit of the taxpayer for decades? You're able to explain why this man's citizenship has not been cancelled?
Put simply, Joni has sent 7 emails, I think, to Home Affairs and Immigration with this detailed information. She went into archives in an open access period and was able to pull the files. So we actually have the handwritten documents from Immigration where they've actually said he should be charged under Section 50 of the Citizenship Act, but they believe that he was offshore at the time, and the file got moved and it got lost and it was forgotten.
And there's no statute of limitations for that
There is
offence,
not.
and it existed at the time that he did these
That's
things?
correct, yeah.
Yeah. So would you be calling on the Australian government and the relevant minister to seriously consider cancelling his citizenship?
Yes, certainly. We have called on multiple ministers since 2022. So I've got endless correspondence stating that they take it on notice, they understand, they accept, they're looking into it. But the actual citizenship documents, it's all there. It's literally all there, the account.
Is he a resident of New South Wales? Do you know?
Correct.
Yeah, Bella.
Yes, he is.
He's still so as of today, he's a resident of Ballina.
Yes. No.
Just recently moved, but I won't divulge where that is,
No.
but we do know that he's
Yes.
moved.
Resident of New South
But
Wales.
he is.
He's in northern New South Wales, yeah.
Yep.
You say in the submission that he lied at the coronial inquest. I'm not sure if that was found positively by the coroner or not. It may well have been. And he's clearly someone with a history of lying and deceit. And you also say that there was some talk of him being charged with perjury arising out of the inquest.
Yes.
Has that investigation ever led anywhere? Have you been told whether he is to be charged?
The question was put to Joe Dowie at the reward press conference by Brian Seymour, who came. He, as one of the journalists who's worked on the Lady Vanishes podcast, so he knows my mum's story back to front. He asked the question about whether that was going forward with any charges for perjury, and he took that on notice.
And you've never been told since?
No.
So how long ago was that?
May 4th.
Okay, this year?
Yeah.
This Rick Blum obviously seems to be a con man based on what you've told me of his criminal record. And you're sure that he had an association with your mother? Is that clear on the evidence?
An affair with her, yes.
Yeah. I mean, is it your view, and look, you don't have to answer this, but is it ultimately your view that she's fallen under the spell of a con man?
Well, when she left the country, she had sold her house very quickly at a loss. We have spoken to other witnesses who have also had relationships with this same man overseas. They speak of very similar circumstances where he's encouraged them to sell their house, move overseas and start a new life. My mum changed her name to the same name that he was using, being Ramakel. Same initials as what he had on the driver's licence. He was using that driver's licence, which this has all been talked about in the inquest, and he admitted to using an identity from a man that he'd had a relationship with a previous woman over in Luxembourg. He'd taken his identity and then managed somehow to get a Queensland driver's licence in that name. He actually accused my mum of stealing that driver's licence out of his wallet while he was at her house, so that for the purposes so she could change her name to the same name as him. He left the country 5 days before my mum did, but he was using a different passport on that occasion of Richard Lloyd Westbury. My mum was using a passport in the name Florabella Ramakel. So it's my personal opinion that he probably separated. He doesn't say that he travelled overseas, just to preface, but it's my personal opinion that he would not travel with my mum if he was going under a different passport after she'd just gone through the Supreme Court to change her name legally to his same name. He flew back into the country 2 days before her. She's flown back in. Then we have all her timestamps down here, hence why I'm in Grafton, because she used her Medicare card in Grafton. All her money came out of her bank accounts in Byron Bay. He was living locally to this area. Since the reward has come out, I've had multiple leads come forward. We've just found a timestamp in my mum's handwriting in Yamba. We've also just recently, over the last couple of days, actually found out about more information that is quite concerning in Ballina as well.
So when's that timestamp from?
The 9th of August 1997. So my mum flew back in.
Just on that, sorry, Ms. Layden, and I don't want to divert you, but in your submission you say that her passport came back in, but you're convinced that she actually came back at that time as well?
Yes, I believe that.
Okay, because that she flew back in at about that time, but she was with that passport coming back in.
Yes, and there's a lot of controversy on that. As you can probably appreciate, that opens up a lot of inquiry to people online. There's a lot of people who believe that she was murdered overseas and never came back and someone else used her passport. I sit here firmly and say we've now had confirmation of her own handwriting in Yamba.
That indicates that she actually had come back.
She has come back, but what hasn't been addressed or discussed in any court of law or with the police is any coercive control, gaslighting, manipulation that I personally believe my mum was in a state of that. She was 51 years of age. She was lonely. She liked being in relationships. And I think the catalyst for her was, let's go on a trip overseas. Let's go on the Orient Express and start a new life together in Luxembourg.
Just to be clear, she came back on what passport? Remakel?
Yes, correct.
Barter?
And she changed it legally, I might add. She didn't get a fake passport. She actually went into the Supreme Court in Brisbane and changed her name legally. She just didn't tell anybody about it. And that was what the police narrative ran with.
Absolutely no doubt in your mind that she came back to Australia.
She came back here, 100%.
And when you talked about the handwriting, did you have that? Have you got a copy of that handwriting? Is that being compared to any other handwriting, or is it something?
It's just my mum's handwriting.
Yep.
10,000%. I saw it. The gentleman who found it sent it to me. He was overseas at the time and he said, I think I might have found something. I'm travelling. Let me get it for you and I'll send it to you. And I was on the phone to a girlfriend and nearly vomited when I saw it because it's 100% her handwriting.
So did your family have legal representation at the inquest?
I did, yes.
And was it put to Mr. Blum that he'd been involved in your mother's death?
Yes.
Yeah.
He said no.
Yeah. And was that positively put to him that he had actually murdered her?
They were asked, did you murder Marion? And he said no.
I thought in your evidence here, Ms. Condos, that he later admitted that he was in a relationship with her.
Oh, so did you ask murder?
Murdered. I asked murdered.
Not in a relationship.
So I asked if it was put to him at the inquest by the lawyer for the family that he had murdered her, and it was.
Oh, murdered. Sorry. Yes.
Sorry.
He did deny being in a relationship initially.
Correct.
Then admitted that he
So
had.
the next day, so he was interviewed by police. They asked him, "Oh, do you know about a missing person, Marion Barter? Are you aware of her?" He said no. And the next day, he messaged or got in contact back with the police, and he said, "Actually, I do know her, and I had an affair with her."
So do you have any doubt that he killed her?
Ooh.
And you don't have to answer that question.
Well, you can answer it under privilege.
You can, yeah.
I'll pause on that. I think everyone knows my thoughts on what's happened to my mum without actually having to say it, but it definitely needs further investigation. And part of what I didn't say before, if I can probably add that in now, that the inquest into my mum's disappearance was categorised into two parts. So one is my mum dead or alive. Two, did the police act appropriately on her case? So they found that she had died. And that the police between 1997 and 2011 did not act appropriately, and the lack of them investigating is the reason why Marion is still missing today. And despite key evidence being uncovered by community members, a full investigation into any alleged connection between Rick Blum and my mum has never been conducted by New South Wales Police. As I said, I used to get told at the inquest that he's not on trial. So an inquest is not a trial. It's a fact-finding mission to find out what's happened, and it's up to the coroner then to suggest what happens next.
But the finding was he was a person of significant interest in this.
He was on the stand for 9 days. I think that's pretty significant in an inquiry as well.
And since the inquest, what has the attitude of New South Wales Police been? Like, how do you liaise with the New South Wales Police? Are you that's the first question. Are they proactively coming to you, or do you have to go pursue them? What's the nature of the interaction and relationship there?
Look, it's a very tricky position to be in when you have a missing persons case, because we really want the police to work with us and help us. So I've always tend to be very positive about what's happening in the now, but obviously there's been a lot of debacle and problems that have arisen. Joni was talking before actually about the work that these guys are doing in helping cold cases. The simple fact of the matter is, if the officer, when I went into Byron Bay Police, he went to the effort of finding out that $80,000 had been transferred out of my mum's bank account. He didn't take the next step to find out to where. Where did the money go? Because if we knew where that money landed, I might not have needed Joni Kondos to come in and help me find the information. So there's all of that as well.
Just in terms of coronial inquests, my understanding is that with those inquests, unless new information comes forward, it basically goes, it's put on in hiatus at least for 5 years. Could you, what's your approach to that, and have you provided new information to the police since that inquest? And
yeah, so I've written about this here as well, because we actually Googled this. We found out about the 5 years, no investigation after an inquest. We didn't know that fact to begin with, and I did hear in the last inquiry that has now since been changed to 2 years. That's a long time. We're talking about a gentleman who's 87 years of age in 3 weeks. You know, we don't have another 2 years. I've been waiting 29 years already. And the fact
87 is Mr. Bloom.
Correct.
Yep.
And, you know, when my mum's case has been forgotten about so many times, and it's only my injection that actually brings about, like even Joe Dowie said, the reason that the reward is happening is because Sally's pushed for it. And to go back to your question before, I have a good relationship with the detectives on the case right now, or detective. But the problem is, this is what has come about in understanding that they have 36 of them trying to manage 750 cases. It's no wonder that I don't hear from them when I'm sending them some information. I'm not getting. For me, if I find something that's new, I want to know right away. Are you acting on this? And I can wait weeks before I hear anything. And again, it's not their fault. I don't blame them for that. But there's a problem in the system that they're not getting supported either. And that needs to change. Like, we need to have more staff so they can actually help us, because I actually believe that they want to solve a case. That's not what they're trying to do. They're not trying to not solve it, but they just have no capacity to do it. And that's a big problem. And the government needs to come in and help support the policing as well. Like, it's such a big mess that it's not just one element that's breaking the system. It's lots of little things that are breaking the system.
You've raised a really interesting point about the role of like volunteers, the community, because always, it's the community who provide, it's people, the public that provide evidence to the police that solve these cases if they are to be solved. And there's an increasing number of people involved, volunteers. We look at the case of Lynette Dawson, the role of podcasts in these, and it's a similar situation here. Do you think that there's a way that the police can better harness that interest and the efforts of the community in these cases?
I think it certainly needs to be looked at. Purely from the point of view of, if I think back to when I was doing, as Sally mentioned, my family history stuff, that was in the early 2000s. So we needed to actually trundle down to, libraries and archives and things and physically go through. Now we're in an era where there's podcasts, there's media, there's so-called armchair detectives or web sleuths, and we're basically active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right across the world. So, and I think that possibly law enforcement haven't really got their head around the fact that this is actually real, this is happening. We can, as per Marianne's case, and it's not just myself talking as myself, I'm talking for other representatives here that are community researchers as well. We do provide legitimate, genuine information. So in this case, you've seen how that it has actually borne out to basically push the case along to this stage where he was on the stand for 9 days. So I think that there really should be some kind of formal or legal working out, because it is a one-way street. So the only reason why I was able to dedicate 7 years to this case from 2019, and I'm still continue to work on it today, almost full-time over COVID, was purely because I had access to the brief of evidence with the coronial inquest. Prior to that, I wasn't even able to access that information to
And
be
you
able
provided
to
that
further
via
links. That's correct. So I was legally provided that.
You were
document.
legal. And
Yeah.
in what capacity?
As
Full capacity. I actually requested it because
Yes.
what had happened was, Joni sort of touched on it before about the media. I had been very open with the media. I told them everything because no one was listening to me. That's a very bad trap for us living in the missing space, because you aren't listened to most of your life. My family just wanted to put their head in the sand and go, oh, well, the police said she's, wanted to start a new life. We're accepting of that. And heads goes in the sand. They don't talk about it. So I was left as a person who does need to talk about it. It's part of my mental health, is helping me to be able to express and talk about it. So sitting there and having a coffee with someone in the media, you tell them everything and off you go, and the roller coaster starts. And I'm very grateful to that, but it can cause problems. It can be a problem when I then get told, well, you've signed a document with the coroner's court, you're not allowed to talk about it. So we found Rick Blum, and I wasn't able to tell the podcasters that I had found him, and this caused problems for me because I was then withholding information from them where I had previously been telling them, and they had helped me endlessly to get to that point. Without them, I wouldn't be here. So there's the catch-22 for me, but it's a really bad situation to be in. And the only other two people who were allowed to see the brief of evidence was my husband and my eldest daughter, who was 21 at the time. And so I requested and said, I can't have this discussion with my 21-year-old daughter. This is traumatising for her. It's her grandmother that she's never met, and she's having massive impact on her life. So I asked if Joni could see it. I said, she's actually the person who's finding the majority of the information anyway that is in the brief of evidence. So they granted us that, thankfully, and we both had to sign a document that we weren't allowed to talk to public anywhere. And that also had harmful effect for the case, because I then couldn't talk to the media to tell them what was happening, and I literally walked out of the coroner's court and I had the entire universe of media standing right in front of me, and I was not allowed to speak to any of them.
So just on that, Sally, there's obviously, there is often a priority to keep the material that investigations produce confidential, because the last thing you want to do, for example, is provide the perpetrator with information. But in respect of cold cases where lots of things are happening, where matters are actually being solved by public participation, and bearing in mind what the founder of modern policing said, Sir Robert Peel, which was the police are the public and the public are the police, do you think there might be a case for making public entire briefs of evidence with suitable redactions in certain cold cases to allow this community participation to occur better?
Can I just add something there too before I answer the question?
I know what you're going to say.
So Mr. Rick Bloom actually got to see and
I saw
digest
that in the submission.
the entire brief of evidence. So essentially,
Which would tend against the argument they should be kept confidential for that reason.
well, that's right.
If one assumes he's the perpetrator.
Yes, yes.
He was able to read the entire brief of evidence. No other witnesses were, just him. And then you could tell that he'd read it in what he was saying in his
Because-
testimony.
Yeah.
He was
things
looping
would
it
change.
through the just comments that I had made and things like that. I mentioned my mum and a pilot, and then all of a sudden the pilot's coming to his house to pick up the tea chests and put them in the back of the car, and just little tiny details. And I'm still bewildered, as is Joni, that he was allowed to see that. I agree that briefs of evidence should be allowed to be seen, but probably not until after the inquest. I will say always,
Seen in terms of online publicly?
Yeah.
Or provided to certain people, or what?
Yeah, so we still can't show you guys. Like, we still
With
can't.
the agreement of the family.
Yeah, I guess it has to be. And redactions made where necessary, because obviously there's a lot of private information in those brief of evidence as well.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff in there. We've still got stuff that was redacted by the police that we didn't want to see. There was a whole file in there, and we questioned why the file wasn't put into the brief of evidence by New South Wales Police. And then there was a whole big discussion about, oh, well, we'll let you pick 7 of the items. So we could see what the items were. We couldn't see what was behind it. So instead of getting the whole brief of evidence or that whole document, we were allowed to pick certain things. So we had to work out what ones do we think was most important to see to help us.
Yeah, what are the priorities?
Why weren't you given what was the reason given by the police that you weren't allowed to see the entire brief?
I can't remember.
But
Well,
you would much prefer to have been able to see the whole thing.
Yes, yes.
Well, we're just trying to find my mum. Like, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to, I don't know, like, I think there's such this whirlwind of what we're trying to achieve when we have a missing person. The point blank is my brother died with words that were not true, not truly spoken. My grandparents both died thinking their daughter had gone missing on her own account. None of her family talked to me because they got upset that I did a podcast because I had to be heard. The podcast really took off because my mum was married to a famous football player. Not because she was missing. I'd gone to 60 Minutes 4 times and said, hey, would you please help me tell my story? I've got something to tell. No answer, no reply. But as soon as we did a podcast and people started listening, it starts getting momentum, and it shouldn't be like that. It should not be like that. Everyone matters. Every single case matters. It's the same with the rewards. Like, I get the $1 million reward. I've got people commenting going, well, why does your mum deserve a $1 million reward? What about my brother? He doesn't have a reward, and it makes me feel sick to the stomach. Everybody should have a $1 million reward, because you know what? If they solve the case, great. That actually saves them going to an inquest and spending $1 million on an inquest. For what? Like, do you know what I mean? I think everybody's equal. Everyone should be treated equal in this, and it's not the case.
So just on your brother, you say in your submission, my brother took his own life at the age of 27, believing the police had spoken to our mum, them telling us she didn't want anyone to know where she is or what she was doing. That quote, "You can tell them to stop looking for me in Byron Bay as I'm far, far away." Is it your understanding that that conversation never occurred and that that was incorrect information?
That the police didn't speak to her.
Correct.
Well, there's no record of them on the police file. So I got a phone call and they told me that we've located your mother. She doesn't want anyone to know where she is or what she's doing.
But there's no evidence of
word
that on the
perfect.
police file.
No, it was a man who rang me, not a female. My grandfather then took action himself, as I said, went to the Salvation Army. Then the Queensland Police then told him that they had spoken to her as well, and there was a comment made to me from my family saying that you can stop looking for me in Byron Bay because I'm far, far away, and you can tell Sally that I'm annoyed with her because she didn't put any or the money for the car into my account. That's a whole nother story. But my mum had left her car with me. I was supposed to sell my car, and I was planning to give her the money from my sale of my car into her bank account, hence why I had her bank account, and hence why when I rang the bank I had her account details. I didn't sell the car until months later, and then by which point she was then missing. And I said to my grandfather, "What do I do with the money?" He said, "Well, don't put it in the account. Just keep it and give it to her when she comes home." Because we didn't know who was accessing her account. We've just been told that money's been drawn out of her account and withered away to nothing. So it was a very terrible situation to put me in as well. I didn't really want to be in that situation. My car was brand new. I didn't need a car, but I just said I'd sort of swap out and give her the money for my car and whatever. And those comments have sat with the family. I've only heard that third hand, so I don't tend to put it in any of my evidence because it was only said to me by one of the sisters. But yeah, there's a lot of that over 29 years.
Ms. Layden, before we
Yes.
wrap up, you talk in your submission extensively about the Green Seat project. Do you want to just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I'd love that opportunity. So when I went through the coronial process, I have put some recommendations in there about death certificates and things like that specific to missing people, which I really hope you guys really take on board because that's something that really needs attention. But I left that process and I felt like I was on an island. I didn't have any help from anybody. The lady vanishes finished. The police just gave me a hug and said, "Good luck," kind of vibe. And I was just left. And it was just that my kids and I were talking, we just had nowhere to go. We have no body. We have no memorial. I actually don't know where my mum went missing from because she travelled, she's here, she's in Brisbane. I just don't know. And I just came up with the idea. My grandparents actually have a seat at Moffat Beach and they've got a plaque on their seat up there where they lived. And my middle daughter actually loves going there whenever she's feeling sad and wants to go and remember my grandparents because she didn't have my mum in her life. And I came up with the idea maybe we should have a green seat where we could put a plaque on there notifying people about missing persons. So there's a plaque that says the missing matter, and we've created a QR code. And my husband's actually created a website, and we are very gently asking families personally if they would like their missing loved one to be a profile on that website. It's a bit more humanised rather than just the height and weight and hair colour and eye colour of a person. We've also found in a lot of my work that I'm doing in this space now that most of those records are usually incorrect. You would think after 29 years and all of the information that I've gathered, I was sitting in headquarters on the 4th of May for that $1 million award, and they had my mum's year of birth incorrect and the last known location was also incorrect. No notification that there was a reward at all at that point. So I came up with the concept of doing the Green Seat project, and because the community behind us is so huge, we already had one placed on the spit at the Gold Coast. Since then, we've now got, I think, close to 17 other seats going in. I've come down in March earlier this year with Joanne Greensill, who is talking later. She also has a missing person, and we gave a deputation to council. There was a unanimous vote of yes, that they would support us in putting in 2 green seats. So there is one going in here in Grafton and one in Yamba shortly. among others around the country. So it's a place of hope. It's a beacon, if you like, of somewhere where you can go to sit and remember that people are missing in our communities. It's a place where people can reflect on their loved one, but also bring about learnings and understanding that, the impact that we have when we have a missing persons on our community. Every time I'm doing a presentation now to Rotary or to councils, I sit there and say to them, last year around 52,000 people were reported missing in Australia. And they say in the statistics that 12 people are directly affected by having a missing loved one. So that's 624,000 Australians impacted by having a missing loved one last year alone in Australia. And I have men coming up to me at the end saying, "Did you mean to say that number? Or do you mean forever there's been 52,000 people missing?" I said, no, just last year. And their mouths drop on the ground because people aren't aware. We get no funding. We get no help in this space. There's no guidebook for us. We're fumbling our way through the best we can. And the Green Seat Project was something that I just feel like could be really taken to the next level at a national level so that we can have somewhere to remember these people. We literally have nowhere to go. And I went to Brisbane City Council when I first started this, and they said, we've created a memorial for missing people in our cemetery on the north side of Brisbane. And I said, that's quite traumatising for me. I actually don't have a body. I don't want to go to a cemetery. I want to look at a body of water and think about my mum and think about where could she be and remember her. I don't want to sit in a cemetery, and I'm certainly not going there to remember a missing person. So it's about bringing awareness. There's so much red tape and so many hoops you have to jump through. It's a very hard task, but we're working heavily on that at the moment. So thank you for asking about it.
Well, that's an excellent note to conclude on. I thank you very much for your evidence today. It's enormously helpful. You've made an amazing submission. You've done incredible work pursuing justice for your mother and for a member of our community. We deeply appreciate it, and we'll certainly be considering your submission. We may well be asking you to come back because you've made such an excellent submission. And you've got such an interesting, compelling and informative case. I think there's a lot of learnings on it. So I wish we had more time.
Sorry, it's very hard to talk about in 45 minutes.
We understand that. And
Thank
so
you.
this is an iterative process. This inquiry may well be going for some time, but we deeply appreciate you taking the time to come down to Grafton to talk to us today, for making the submission and for the work you've done. Thank you very much.
And thank you for having us too, because this is important. Thank you to Joni and thank you to everyone turning up today, because it's important for us that we are heard. There's a lot of stuff to talk about that I haven't even touched on today. So we are very happy and very open to helping work through this process and making it better for everyone moving forward. I can't change my circumstances. I'm living it, but we certainly can do better for the next person whose family member goes missing in the future.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stace, if you could state your name and swear either the oath or affirmation. Thank you very
My
much.
name is Peter Stace. I'm from Broomstead. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stace. Do you have an opening statement you'd like to make, please?
Mate, I'd just like to bring a few things up about my daughter's murder. And I'd just like to say, first off, that there's details about my daughter's murder that have never been released to the public. The police refused to release the details, but I'm going to release them here and hope, because it was a shocking murder. And maybe if these details had been released, people would have put these bastards in earlier on. The day my daughter went missing, she was 16 and she was a virgin. Now that morning, she also started a menstrual period, and she had to ask my wife to borrow some tampons. And then she went to work. Now, for what happened to that poor young girl, it's despicable, mate. And maybe the police should have released that. Might have made public come forward. But anyway, apart from that, I've got a couple of questions. Why did the police pay money to a drunk in a McLean hotel to wear a wire in order to record a so-called confession from another patron? Only trouble was the drunk apparently had a loose tongue, and half McLean knew beforehand what was happening. Talk about comedy cops. Question 2. How many lies can a major suspect fabricate before he is charged with hindering a police murder investigation? This suspect, one version, he had no car, was nowhere near Redcliffe or Lake Aragon. But the next version, he had his car, was at Lake Aragon, and did see a man in a suit with blood on him. Now, what the hell? This was also claimed that this suspect then threatened the police with legal action if they did not stop harassing him over my daughter's murder. The suspect then sold up and left Broom's Head, hopefully forever. Another point. Another prime suspect in my daughter's murder is a criminal, convicted and imprisoned for raping and attempting to murder 3 Yamba schoolgirls. I personally met one of those raped schoolgirls and agreed to take her to visit my daughter's murder and gravesite. As we approached the murder site, she started getting agitated, panicking and freaking out. And she said, quote, "This is so much like where that bastard took us. I think I need to leave," end quote. We had to leave almost immediately because she became scared. I really felt for that young girl. On the week of my daughter's murder, this same suspect was supposed to report to a Sydney police station on Monday, Wednesday and Friday as part of his parole conditions. I am led to believe he did not report on Wednesday as required. This gives him 5 days on the loose to do what he likes. Plenty of time to go to the North Coast and return. Also, why did the police show my wife and myself a photo of this criminal suspect and then stipulate, "You did not see this photo from the police"? Well, who did I see it from if you're not police? Right, another point. The coroner's report, 12 years after Lee's murder. The state coroner at the time, Carl Milanovich, he thought the police investigation. He was critical of the investigation. He removed the investigation from the local police and directed the case be given to the Cold Case Homicide Squad. Now, the Cold Case Homicide Squad, they've had it for years, but I have not heard from the Cold Case Homicide Squad since the last officer in charge of the case went on maternity leave to have a baby. And I've heard nothing since. So that's the story. That's where I'm at. I know nothing.
And when was that, Mr. Stace? When was the last time you were contacted by them?
Mate, it would have been late last year. The lady detective actually came up and she asked if I'd take her up to the murder site, which I did. And I left her there. And that's the last I've heard from her until she rang me some months later and said, "I'm going on maternity leave. There'll be someone else in charge."
And had you had much contact with her, or was that the first time you'd heard from her? Like, since your daughter's murder, how many different police have contacted you? Has it been the same one through that period, or has it been a lot of them?
Mate, there's been dozens. Scores. That's what I mean. The case gets passed on from one bloke to another bloke to another bloke, mate. It's as if it's just handed down and no one gives a stuff.
And are you told, like, that someone's leaving, or is it just someone else sends you an email or knocks on the door?
No, you just get told that I'm in charge of the case now. I know one bloke that was in charge of the case, he got the sack for corruption in that Gary Jubilant case, mate, you know. So the way the police have treated my daughter's case, I don't trust the police, mate. I've got no time for them.
And I've got some questions. Did you are you aware of whether the police have ever questioned Anthony Apps about Lee Ellen's abduction or murder?
Yes, I am.
And do you know what the outcome was?
No.
So how do you find out that they're talking? Like there's a particular person of interest, or like is it just an ad hoc? Every now and again, you get told, "Oh, we're doing this, we're talking to this," or do you hear through the community?
Mate, the information from the police is very minimal. As I said, they don't just tell you anything, mate. They don't want you to know stuff. At one stage, I requested a meeting with the head officer from Coffs at Grafton Police Station, and I said, me and my wife went in there, and I said to this, Brian was his name, his head police officer, he's dead now. I said, you give me one reason why I shouldn't go and hire a private investigator, mate, because I can't trust you cops. And his response was, mate, we can't tell you everything. We've got to keep some things. I said, mate, you're telling me nothing. Right? I said, I don't trust you no more. End of story. And that detective died not long after that, mate. So.
And tell us about at originally, like, on the disappearance of Lee, like, how did the police act? How did you, like, when you told them that she disappeared? Was there like a major search conducted straight away? What was their attitude at the time?
Mate, we can't do nothing for 48 hours. She probably just left home.
That's what they said to you.
That's what they said.
And then, how did you feel about that?
Mate, I knew she hadn't left home because my daughter was scared of the dark. She was a home girl, mate.
She was holding down a job, the supermarket?
She just started a job, mate, and she hitchhiked to work instead of catching the bus, trying to save money, which resulted in her getting kidnapped.
And what about after 48 hours? After, she hasn't turned up a day or two later, of course, you're probably making representations to the police again. What do they say then?
Mate, very little. They were investigating, but they weren't concerned. Yeah.
And, of course, in the horrendous circumstances where her body was found, what can you tell us what they then did, what the police did, how they told you and what they then did at that time?
Yeah, mate, they come and I'd been out fishing with a couple of mates that day, and I'd got home, and I'd only been home 10 minutes. I still cleated fishing. I can still remember this detective turning up in blue overalls, and I said, "Oh, there's something wrong here." Anyway, he asked to come inside, and we went inside, and he told us that remains had been found, and it was suspected to be our daughter. But then me and my wife, we had to give DNA, because at the time the cops didn't even have DNA testing in Australia, and we had to give DNA to be sent to Canada and England to identify the body, mate. Not very good.
And did they tell you, like, what they were going to do to investigate it, like if they had leads, if there were people of interest, what they were doing in terms of the investigation over those coming?
The cops told me nothing, virtually. And they even took me in and investigated me for murdering my own daughter, mate. And I had to sit through that. And some of the things they said to me was horrible. And at the end of it, they give me a CD. They said, "There's your copy of this." And I said to the coppers, and I said, "Mate, stick it up your arse." I said, "I never want to remember this day again. Don't want no copies."
And then what was the nature of your communication with the police over coming months as no one was arrested?
Mate, I think the cops got sick of me because I was on their back all the time.
When you say that, what do you mean? Were you going down and visiting them like every week?
I was ringing up, mate,
Yep.
you know, and nothing was going on. And in the end, I just give up.
And what sort of time period are you talking about after a few months of that? Is that what you're talking about, like a few months?
Oh, 2 years.
2 years.
Yep.
And then did the contact from the police just basically fade away?
Yeah, it did, mate. They got nothing to tell you, so they don't contact you.
And how did you? When was the coronial inquest into Lee's death? Has there been? I think there's been a couple, hasn't there?
No, there's only been one, and it didn't take place until 12 years after Lee's death. And as I said, even the coroner at the time, Carl Milanovic, he criticised the way the case had been handled by the police, mate.
What did he say?
Well, that's when he criticised them, the way the case had been handled, and he said, I'm taking it off the local detectives and handing it to the cold case squad.
And was there anyone that was was named as a person of interest or persons of interest at that inquest?
Yeah, there were several people, and I was one of them.
And
So that there was people at that inquest that said they spotted me because at the time I had a white Cortina picking me daughter up. Now that was impossible because I was up at casino working. But there was another gentleman that had a white casino similar to mine
a white Cortina.
that lived in Maclean or Harwood or somewhere. Now, to my knowledge, that person was never investigated. Now, I've got all the transcripts, mate, and he was never investigated, yet he owned a white Cortina that I was supposed to pick my daughter up in. So I think the investigation by the police leaves a lot to be desired.
Colleagues, have you got any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Thanks so much, Mr. Sace, for coming along. In the coronial inquest into your daughter's death, the coroner heavily criticised the inordinate time it took for police to complete the investigation.
Yes.
And actually compile the brief. And I understand that he noted that it just shouldn't take 12 years to put a brief together unless there's clear evidence of an ongoing investigation.
Yep.
Are you able to tell us anything more about your understanding of the circumstances around that apparent inordinate delay? Like, why did it just take so long without much happening?
You'd have to ask the police that, but like when my daughter was murdered, it was 4 years before I was allowed to bury what remains there was.
Yeah.
You know, 4 years. I had to wait for a burial, mate. And even then, there was only a couple of bones.
Yeah.
So, you'd have to ask the police why everything takes so long, mate. They're the ones running the show.
Yeah. And the coroner made a series of recommendations around specialist resources for investigating homicides and particular attention needed in rural areas. Did you have the opportunity to have legal representation at the inquest?
Yes, I did. I had Victims of Homicide Support Group, who I can't speak highly enough of. They contacted a barrister in Sydney, and this barrister sent me 10 foolscap folders full of information, witness statements and the whole works.
Yeah.
I got the copies of the whole lot, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it says online that police and the coroner identified 3 men as persons of interest and prime suspects.
Yes.
Apps, O'Leary and Davis. Is that your understanding?
Well, I'm not supposed to say names, but you're correct.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us that you think would be helpful for us to know in terms of things that you might know about what's occurred that that might be of assistance to the committee?
Mate, off the top of my head, I cannot recall anything that I can help.
Yeah.
Say that would help, mate.
At any time, Mr. Stace, has like the police contacted you once it's been, I think, passed after the coronial inquiry was referred to the Unsolved Homicide Unit. Are you contacted by New South Wales Police now to tell you, or since the inquest, to tell you whether or not the case is active again, been picked up, or anything like that?
No. You know, this cold case squad, though there's so many detectives, apparently each detective's working on 20-odd cases at once. 20-odd murder cases for one person. Now, how's that going to solve crime, mate? There's just too much work for one person.
And in your experience, your evidence here today is that one person changes every couple of years.
Yes, mate, mate, 30, 40, 50 detectives have been on my daughter's case, mate. You know, it's just a joke.
What do you think of? What's your attitude to announcements? Because there's been a reward, and the coronial inquest suggested increasing the reward. What's your attitude to the rewards and them being set at a certain amount, or an announcement that it's been doubled? Does that have much effect?
No, it doesn't. Like, I remember when the reward first came out, and I think there was a $50,000 reward for my daughter. And then, and this is no disrespect, there was a young Chinese girl went missing in Sydney. And within a matter of weeks, Bob Carr, the Premier at the time, he'd put up a $100,000 reward. So I wrote a letter to Mr. Carr, and I queried him why the reward was put up so quick. I said, are you trying to buy votes off the Chinese people? Or what? Anyway, I got a response. The reward for my daughter went to $1 million a matter of weeks later. But the reward still sits there.
To no effect? You didn't hear of anything?
The reward done nothing. So, and there's people are protecting. There's people who know who murdered my daughter, and they're protecting them. Like, I know for a fact at the coronial inquest, a certain person's mother was there every day, and then every night she was ringing her son, who was in jail, and telling him what happened at the inquest, mate. Well, I know that because the police told me that.
So the police told you. What, did they do that formally, or did they say that was part of an investigation, or was that just one of the detectives thinks that?
I was talking to the detective at the time, and it might have been just off the cuff. It mightn't have been official. But he did tell me, mate, the mother had been there every day and ringing her son in jail every friggin' day and telling him what happened.
Mr. Stace, thank you for coming. What support do you believe families should receive during...
What was that again?
What support should families receive while investigations are ongoing? Because it doesn't seem like you've had...
Off who?
I'm not sure. If they should have support, where would you like to see the support, or what has helped you most?
Probably me other daughter and wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to be there. I've got to still be there for them, mate.
Yeah. But other than that, there's been no sort of formal support process via police or...
Not from the police, from victims of homicide. Yeah, they've been wonderful, mate. But the police, no.
And so what made it harder than it needed to be?
I beg your pardon?
What made the experience that you've gone through harder than it needed to be?
Probably just the way it's been handled, mate. Like, you're not allowed there's certain suspects, but you're not allowed to say things and you're not allowed to do things, mate.
Mm-hmm.
You know? You can't go and ask them questions and that. It's just, in my opinion, it's all too much in favour of the criminal.
Okay. And did you ever feel like your voice wasn't being heard?
Well, yeah, I know. The police don't like me much because I speak my mind and I abuse them. And they don't like hearing the truth sometimes.
Mm. And what would you like to see change so that your experience isn't an experience that other people have to go through?
Mate, more, even when people are found guilty, they get a slap on the wrist. It doesn't deter people. Right? I know it won't happen, but I'm a firm believer in capital punishment. Capital punishment. You know? In the old days, mate, they had severe punishments. It never stopped the crime. Now, in these days, we've got easier punishments. So how do you expect to stop crime?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
What do you know, like, when I'm sure that there's people that in the community that, you know, care about Lee's case and your circumstance, and they come forward with information. What's been your experience with providing that to the police? Like, how do you do that, and what's the police's attitude when
What do you mean when people tell me?
people tell you, or
Right.
when they learn things? Do they just call Crime Stoppers? That sort of that flow of information from the community through to the police.
Mate, I've had it happen. I've had people come and tell me things. And I say, mate, you should be telling the cops. And I said, if you don't, I said, I'm going to ring them up as soon as you leave, mate. So you better go and tell them. That's what I do.
And if those people do they get an outcome, or do they just ring Crime Stoppers, or like what's the police's attitude if you call them to new information coming forward?
Their attitude, mate, new information, 9 times out of 10, they just don't want to know about it. You know?
You tell them, like, do you call them up, or do you get a response if you send them an email or something like that?
Mate, I don't do social media, I don't do emails, I talk in person.
Yeah. What would you like to see happen? Is there anything that you would like to see happen, or changes occur in this space?
Mate, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's going to change the system.
Fair enough, Mr. Stace. Colleagues, do you have any more questions?
Not from me. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Stace. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Stace. Look, our deepest condolences to you and your family for a horrendous circumstance. Our deepest sympathies go to you, and it's a terrible burden to have to bear. We deeply appreciate you coming along, putting on the record that information. It greatly helps the inquiry and develop its recommendations and hopefully make things better going forward. But thank you very much. We deeply appreciate that. If there's any other questions we have in due course, we'll be in contact with you. But thanks again for coming today to give your evidence in very difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stace.
Thanks.
Miss Greensill.
Thank you.
Just getting the pronouns right. Good morning. Thank you very much for your attendance today and your submission. We deeply appreciate it. Before we continue, could I just get you to say your name and swear either the oath or affirmation, please?
Yep. Joanne Greensell, I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much. Is there an opening statement you'd like to make?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Firstly, thank you to the inquiry for the opportunity to speak today and for me to some extent represent the thousands of people impacted by ambiguous loss whose missing loved ones do not necessarily have the profile that some of the cases heard to date have had. Also, thanks to the Honourable Jeremy Buckingham for his dogged determination to see this inquiry get up and to those who supported him. To those who consider that this inquiry is a waste of time and resources, I ask you to walk a day in the shoes of anyone who has endured ambiguous loss. And perhaps rather than asking whether this inquiry is a waste of time and resources, ask how did we get here and how do we ensure that this inquiry isn't a waste of time and resources, remembering the well-worn saying that the standards you walk past are the standards you accept. In the summer of 1985-86, I was 17 years old. I was born and raised here in Grafton, and my family had holidayed in Yamba every Christmas holiday since I was small. I had finished year 12 and made the decision to move to Sydney to pursue my hockey goals, study, and most importantly, be closer to Andrew Inglis, who was my teenage holiday sweetheart, my first love. On the night of Boxing Day 1985, Andrew left the Blue Dolphin Caravan Park in his car and has not been seen or heard of since. His car has never been found, 40 plus years. My case is in many ways very different from most that have been before the inquiry to date, in that I don't believe there was any third-party involvement in Andrew's disappearance. However, the trauma, the not knowing, is the same. I acknowledge that for those families and friends living with unresolved third-party involvement, either known or suspected, that they have additional grief of knowing that somewhere someone knows something, and this frustration must be soul-destroying. For those of us where that is unlikely, poor early investigation is devastating to the outcome because it is very likely that nowhere does anyone know anything. And the loss of early evidence leaves us with no hope and no answers. Early and open-minded action is vital. I also wish to state that I'm not family and I am an example of how broadly reaching the impacts of these cases are. I have said on many occasions the suggestion that on average 12 people are impacted by a missing person is, in my opinion, grossly understated. It seems to me that whatever the scenario, foul play or misadventure, that there has been a culture within police to tick the easiest box. And once that happens, that box becomes immobile. Although not directly covered by this inquiry, I think this extends to what is also now referred to as hidden homicide. I don't know how the government can address this issue, but resourcing or a lack thereof seems to be at the heart of the problem. As an outsider, but as someone who has worked in large institutional environments, it seems that there is a problem with groupthink, a lack of lateral thought, and a persistence with following the usual investigative methods even when this results in no outcome. There are many examples of everyday people who have found themselves sleuthing and discovering vital information. Perhaps the police department could consider that part of their workforce not need be traditional police, but people who have both skill and passion for research and finding answers. I would also suggest that in cases where people and cars disappear simultaneously, particularly in an area like the Northern Rivers, that early inspection of riverbanks and roads adjacent to waterways is vital. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your evidence today, and thank you very much for your submission. It's very important to get the broad range of perspectives. How would you like to see in your opinion, how better should we handle missing persons cases, and in the context of what happened to Andrew back in 1985? What happened at the time, and what do you think should happen into the future?
Yeah, so I think there was an assumption made by his family, by most of us probably, that he had made the decision. He didn't live in Yamba, he was there on holidays and he lived in Camden. to simply return home. And again, we're talking about pre-mobile phones, pre-internet, pre-any of those things. So about 3 days after he left, his father went to a phone box, as you did, to ring his mother. They were separated at the time, to just check that he'd gotten home in one piece. And that was when, of course, we found out that he hadn't arrived back in Camden. And I think it was at that point that his father went to the police station. And Yamba in those days would have been a one-copper town. Given it was Boxing Day, there might have been a couple of other police that had been sent to the area from probably Grafton because of the influx of people during the holiday period. I think that his family lived with continual hope that he had just sort of, he was 18, he'd had a bit of a dummy spit and he just decided to make his own way. I can't tell you how I knew. I just knew the moment I found out he hadn't gone home that we wouldn't see him again. My gut told me that. And because because I think his family, didn't want to perhaps even contemplate that, I don't think there was a lot of push from them for further investigation. In saying that, there was no investigation. I think I was probably the last person to speak to him. I've never been contacted. I don't think any of his mates who were sharing a tent with him were contacted. There was an assumption made that he had left of his own choice, which he did, but that he continued to stay away of his own choice. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think he was suicidal. I think if he had suicided, his car or something would have been found. His bank accounts have not been touched, all of those things. There's no proof of life. Again, there's been no inquests, and again, that's probably because the family have not pushed for it. As a 17-year-old person who was not family, I had no power nor life experience to know what to do or how to influence the situation. So what could have been done differently? I think, as I said, it was an easy box to tick when the family said, we think he's just gone off and he'll come home when he's ready. I think at some point someone should have gone, well, it's been a while. Do we really think that that's the scenario? The night he left, there was a storm. The roads were wet. He'd been out fishing with his mates in the afternoon. There was a few beers consumed, so we probably had a little bit of alcohol in his system, driving on wet roads in a crappy little Datsun. To quote my brother-in-law, they were pretty skiddy cars. And if you drive from Yamba to Grafton, you'll know you spend a lot of time driving along that river. And I don't think that there is a great deal of hope for an outcome for this case, but I speak because I want to see better outcomes for others that are more recent. And that it's not just the family that are impacted. And so I often hear about the family, and that's appropriate. But I think everyone needs to understand it's not just about family. Many of his friends, we all spent a great deal of time. I remember one of the guys who lived at Maitland thought he saw his car in the 12 months after he left, and he stopped and did a U-turn on the highway and followed it. They're the sorts of things that we do when we think we see something or someone that looks like it might be the person that we know that's gone missing.
You were never contacted by the police or made aware that he'd become officially a missing person?
No. I was living in Queensland when we used to get the courier mail at work, as businesses often did in those days, and I was flipping the pages of the courier mail in Missing Persons Week, and it was probably very early on in Missing Persons Week, so I'm going to say it was about 10 or 11 years after he left, so in the 90s. And I turned this page to see the photo that's on the current site just jump off the page at me. And that visceral reaction a decade later told me that this stuff just bubbles under the surface. You never really get past it in the true sense.
Colleagues, do you have some questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Thanks so much for coming along, helping the inquiry. Are you aware whether his disappearance was ever reported formally to the police?
Yes, I believe it was. I believe when his father found out he hadn't arrived home that he went to the police. I mean, he has been listed as a missing person on those pages for a long time. My understanding and my memory is, and I don't know whether this is fact or fiction, it's just my recollection of what I was told at the time, was that at that time there was some level of classification of missing people, and that his family and his mother in particular had told police that she did not want media. So I don't, so that was a decision that she or a request that she made. And of course, and I don't know, the wheres and the why-fors of that. So there was no media. There was nothing. There was no reports. There was nothing in the paper until I saw that missing persons week and a bunch of photos on a page of the Courier Mail. That was the first time that I'd ever seen his case mentioned.
Yeah.
I think there was a Sydney Morning Herald article that Sally found because I lived in Sydney, which I wouldn't have seen because I probably didn't read the Herald at that stage. So there was a little bit of that. Probably came around as a result of Missing Persons Week as well.
And do you know if the police ever sort of conclusively formed a view as to whether he had consciously kind of just left?
No.
Or they formed the view that he was no longer alive, or what view they ever reached?
No, I don't know because, as I said, I've had no contact with the police. I understand that there was a couple of instances in probably the 12 months after this where his father and his younger brother did have some conversations with police, perhaps where they thought that they'd found something or someone that, I've got an inkling of a memory that they went to the Cross at one stage because, apparently that's where everyone goes when they take off. Everyone goes to King's Cross, that seems to be the narrative at times, particularly if they're young. But nothing ever came of that. To the best of my knowledge, the registration on his car was never renewed. The car was never transferred. He didn't touch his bank accounts. So, based on, what I understand since, that I understand that what happened or didn't happen should have triggered a request from the police department for an inquest.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mrs. McDonald?
Thank you. What do you think happened? Like, I've been to that caravan park holiday there as well. It's not something, it's somewhere you do want to return to every year, as you've said. So what do you think happened?
Look, the first place I think, we should have started, or, even now maybe could look is the river, is the Clarence River. There were lots of bends on that road. There's still lots of bends on that road, but it obviously has improved in 40 years. But as I said, there was lots of places where if you lost control off a corner that you could end up in the river. I don't know that occurred to me initially, but I can tell you that when I was living in Queensland, I was living on the Sunshine Coast. It was about 11 years after Andrew left, and there was a young girl, about 18 or 19, disappeared from Noosa. So she'd last been seen at the Rolling Rock, which was a nightclub in Hastings Street, and she never came home. Her mother was very different to Andrew's family. She was talking to every news outlet. She had her daughter's photos on the side of milk cartons, the whole gambit. And about 3 or 4 years after she disappeared, a man was fishing in the Maroochydore River and he got a snag, and that snag was the inside lining of the ceiling of her car. Now, the Maroochydore River, for any of you that have been there, is nowhere near as deep as the Clarence. And her car she'd obviously turned down a street and not realised it ran straight into the river and had literally just driven herself straight into the water, and that car would have just sunk in the silt. One of my older brother-in-laws who grew up in this town will tell you that, when he was a teenager, everybody knew whereabouts in this river they could dump a car if they wanted to dump a car. So that, and it is a massive, massive river, and it is very, very deep, and even where there's not a lot of depth between the top of the water and the where you can put your feet down, it can be very silty. So something like a car would disappear. I don't know that's what's happened, but to me that seems the first thing that that we could or should have looked at. And again, the lack of looking in those first few days and weeks, particularly, there might have been skid marks on the road somewhere. There might have been a tree that was partially pushed over. There might have been a guidepost that was knocked over. There might have been some evidence that a car had gone into the river in any number of places along that river. But that sort of evidence is not going to be there for long, particularly in the summer when we get rain and storms and stuff coming through, and floods. You know, the Clarence.
Yep.
For those of you that aren't local, our river floods on a regular basis. So for me, that's the logical answer to your question, but I obviously don't know that. And it could have happened, you know, you leave Grafton and you go down and a bit further down, you get the other side of Coffs Harbour and you're driving through Nambucca and Maxwell, and there's lots and lots of rivers and lots of roads that run very close to waterways in this part of the world. So that
And-
accounts for his car missing, you know?
Yeah, and do you think there's missed opportunities in terms of communication, or as you said, you weren't interviewed and neither were any of his friends?
Yeah, as I said, you know, it was Boxing Day, busiest time of year in a very small country fishing / surfing village. And I imagine it was just because his family thought that he would just come home, that
Yeah.
move on.
Mhm.
I was probably one of the few that just knew. I just knew in my gut, and I can't explain that to you. I don't know where that came from, but anyone that knew me at the time will tell you I said that right from the get-go.
Mhm.
Had they talked to me and had I told them that, would that have changed anything? I was 17. Maybe not.
Yeah.
But you and the family never countenanced suicide or...
No, I don't believe that. Because again, one, I don't think he was suicidal, but even if that was the case, where's his car? You know, like
Yeah.
he left in the dark, you know. It wasn't like he had a weapon. It wasn't like he had a shotgun or a revolver under his car. If he made some of the choices that other young people are known to make, like gassing themselves and hanging themselves, you've got to do it somewhere, right? The car would be found. Something would be found. I know that's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, because of course everything's possible, because we have so little information that absolutely everything is possible.
We've received some evidence that we might be better served if there's like a specialist agency that looks into missing persons, or more coordination across existing agencies. Do you have a view on that?
Oh, look, I think
currently it's principally focused through the New South Wales Police.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I said, I think that, and as Joni and Sally have also talked about, I think there are many people with skill sets that don't involve carrying a revolver and a set of handcuffs that have the ability to give value to this space, whether it's research, whether it's the SES, whether it's the RFS. I know that Councillor Peter Johnston, who's on the Clarence Valley Council here and who was a member of the RFS, put a submission in about some of the tools and stuff that the RFS have that might be able to be used, when someone goes missing, as an example. I think we need to collaborate across agencies and volunteers and, I often hear on podcasts, a number of retired police, and I think once you're a copper, you're always a copper, who have time and energy and interest. I think we have to find a way to garner every possible resource and find a way to make that a coordinated, efficient effort is going to give people better outcomes than what we've had in the past. I haven't got the answers, but I do think there is a bit of groupthink, and I do think that we don't necessarily think laterally,
Rachel's got it.
And I think it seems to me that there's training that, an investigation follows a certain pattern and a certain pathway and a certain process, and that's fine, but it won't always provide answers, and so we have to be able to think outside the box. If you think about and that's not just in this area. I often think about someone like Charlie Teo, who's a doctor, who says we will never find an answer to brain cancer if we keep doing the same things we've been doing from a research perspective. We have to think differently and we have to think outside the square, because thinking traditionally has gotten them nowhere in 35 years in an outcome for brain cancer. So it's not just in policing. I think lateral thought is important in many places where you're trying to solve a problem.
Ms. Greensill, have you had any involvement at all with his family since then?
Yeah, so I was very close to his family. I went to his father's second wedding. I went to his stepsister's wedding. I don't see much of them now because I don't get to Sydney and stuff. But his parents are English, and friends of mine have suggested that it was the whole stiff upper lip British thing. They never talked about it, not once. Not one. I talked to his brother about it and his stepsisters, but not once did I ever have a conversation with his parents, even though I continued to be a part of the extended family for quite a long time.
And
they
they've
just
not
didn't.
expressed wonder or...
No, they just never talked about it. They just tucked it away. Which was, made it hard, I suppose, harder even again for me because, as I said, I had no influence.
And you're not aware of them being contacted by the police?
Oh, well, obviously his father went and reported him missing, and I do understand there was a couple of contacts early on. As I said, I believe at one point they went into the King's Cross police station because they'd been contacted, but that was, 39 years ago.
Just on that, the family may have gone
Yes.
to the King's Cross.
Yeah, his father and his brother.
Went to the King's Cross police station.
That's my recollection, but I don't know the detail of that.
Okay.
I think Rachel had a question.
I think, yeah, she did, but she said the audio is not very good. So
Miss Merton, can you hear us? And can we hear you? This might be a question from the internet. Rachel?
She's on mute.
she's sending me
There's something.
Something coming in. She's on mute.
She asked me, could I ask what your first interaction with the police was? And it sounds like you didn't have one.
I'm still waiting.
Curtains there now, I think. Yeah.
I'm still waiting. There hasn't been one.
Yeah,
Is that it?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Ms. Greensill, thank you so much for your submission and your testimony today and raising Andrew's important story. We really, really appreciate that. You coming forward, it gives us a lot to consider and also broadens the scope, importantly, of the types of matters that we can consider and make findings and recommendations on. So we deeply appreciate your submission and your testimony, and for you continuing to keep your good friend's memory alive. We deeply appreciate it. If there's any questions we have, we will be in contact in due course through the Secretariat, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
We're good, Hansard, it's good. Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'd like to recommence the hearings into unsolved murders and long-term missing persons cases. Thank you to our next witness, Ms. Kim Marshall. Before we begin, Ms. Marshall, I know Mr. Darcy's joining you with as a support person. He's not giving evidence. But before we commence, if I could get you to state your name and swear either the oath or affirmation, please.
My name is Kim Marie Marshall. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much. Do you have some introductory remarks you'd like to make?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Kim Marshall, and I am a sister of Bronwyn Winfield, nee Reid. Before I deliver my opening statement, I want to acknowledge the attendance of other family members who are present here today. I've consulted the New South Wales Homicide Unit regarding how to approach my evidence today. I am before you today not just as an individual, but as a daughter of Barbara Reid. Our mother was forced to live with the loss of her firstborn and pass away without justice being served. I witnessed our mother not be acknowledged, and this has shaped how I too have lived my life. with the impacts that result from systemic fractures that break the families of the missing. I am here to speak directly about the profound investigative and institutional failures that have compounded our families' trauma and make recommendations today for system restructure, multi-agency and community collaboration and funding allocation. For years, our family has had to endure the excruciating pain of an unresolved investigation regarding my sister, Bronwyn. But the tragedy didn't stop with her disappearance in 1993. The ripple effect of losing Bronwyn has carried an immeasurable toll. There is a profound compounding cost of 5 generations deeply affected by her loss. Instead of receiving compassion and rigorous transparency, our family has been subjected to systemic failures that have left us all isolated. Institutional exclusion, character defamation, and critical failures of evidence. Our mother passed away without ever seeing justice or closure. She spent the latter half of her life suspended in the agony of the unknown, pushed aside by the very institutions that were supposed to protect her. I am sure things have modernised to protect the vulnerable, and we must ensure that we safeguard all children and young people up to the age of 25. To do that, this inquiry must urge investigators to go deeper when interviewing families and witnesses. When you have the right to investigate, have considered conversations, much more detail will come forward. Our family has proven this to where we are today. I too now have proven this with the agency I have taken in recent years. Too often, when people are not experienced or well-versed with something unfamiliar to them, critical details slip through the cracks. We must always remember that Bronwyn's case was so much, much more than what numerous New South Wales Police Force reviews and re-investigations produced for the ODPP to continually reject. New South Wales must do better and address this gap in the judicial system. It may not very well be too late for the responsible person to face legal justice. That is okay. To the person that is responsible, just know that I know what only you know. And they will either live with it or they will deal with it. Enjoy the surf. My mother cannot speak today, and many families are also not here, but I am here to demand system reform and modernisation where collaborative frameworks across agencies and community will be the working model to assure accountability, collective investigation and virtue of care. It fosters trust. We need to be able to rely upon it. All family victims, especially young people aged 25, as a minimum, must be targeted safeguards. They must have them. All communities deserve to access systems that work. I am asking you to address these gaps and modernise the system that is meant to serve and protect us. The world we live in today is a new era for accessing information. Currently, the homicide unit works beyond capacity, and placing a trapdoor in place to manage the demand causes health impacts that I am sure is tracking towards a chronic health junction, harming our children today and in the future. Thank you for everyone involved who has attended today.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. We deeply appreciate you coming along in the most difficult of circumstances to give some evidence. In your initial contribution, and you haven't made a submission, you talked about deep systemic issues with the process. Could you elaborate on that? How do you think the system has failed, and how do you think it could be improved?
The system has failed because when you have people crying out and going along with their own agency to do their own investigations, that just blew me away when I came into the missing person space. I couldn't believe that everyday people were becoming caretakers of a missing loved one. That is just, it does not make sense to me. So the system needs change because it's obviously not giving a responsive service. Impacts are unfolding and they're increasing, and I have lived such a long time to finally come and understand what happened to me as a co-victim. I now clearly understand what I've lived. I didn't in the past, and I had to go and find that out for myself. And I just hope and pray that there's not other people that have lived like I've lived, because it's actually impacted my ability to work and function.
When you talk about being a caretaker, how do you mean a caretaker of of key information,
Yeah.
of understandings of what happened and when and why? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, being able to understand, I'll say again, I shouldn't have to turn up to an inquiry for my sister in 2002 to discover crucial information during the inquiry that I had first-hand knowledge of. I had tried to get that information across, and no matter how I tried or when I tried, I could not get that evidence submitted. So during the inquiry in 2002, I actually got brave enough, heavily pregnant, to actually ask my brother to come with me to speak to the public prosecutor and the detective. I briefly explained at my brother's introduction what information I had, and the answer was, just wait there a minute. They went away. They came back through the doors. Oh, it's too late now. The evidence brief has already been submitted. We can't change it. We're not going to worry about it.
Was this a coronial inquiry or was this a police inquiry?
It's a coronial inquiry. So the deputy state coroner to this day still does not actually know what my evidence was. Plus, I wasn't a witness. My mother wasn't a witness. We were asked through channels not to attend the inquiry. Now, my understanding of what a coronial inquiry is today and in the past, because Family Victim Services has actually supported me with this research, is that my mother and I should have actually been witnesses. We were told why we were not to attend, and that is absolutely disgraceful, and it has affected my self-worth all my life.
Can we wind the tape back
Yep.
a bit to the initial disappearance of your sister? What do you know about that and how the police investigation was conducted at that time?
What I now know is fact is that there was no investigation that took place in 1993. It was only a set of inquiries. That is it. That's all that happened in 1993.
When you say inquiries, what do you mean?
Inquiries mean that there were no statements taken.
So police were made aware that someone was missing?
Yes.
And they went and asked a few people what they knew?
Yes.
But no formal statements were made?
Correct.
Was your sister, did she go onto a missing persons register or you don't know?
Not actually clear. I don't think the missing persons register happened for a period of time, but I would have to actually take that question on notice and give you the answer, which I can. What I do understand is that there was a set of cops running sheets and there was a final local station or command report done, and that was the end of that.
And what's your knowledge of what that report said?
It contained things that clearly identified Bronwyn to be her own person of interest. So for those that don't understand what that means is that she was responsible for her disappearance or her adventure. And then the next of kin that was appointed, and that is something I will recommend for several cases that I'm aware of, is that we shouldn't have gatekeepers actually looking after people's personal effects and people's estates when they don't have a voice themselves. And it should be done, or next of kin should probably be allocated to a person that is transparent and independent, and that may also even exclude my brother. And I will add, my mother was also the next of kin officially, confirmed by Victim Services New South Wales, and my mother was totally, I don't know, she was a blip. So she actually should have been the next of kin and consulted before she handed the case to anybody else to be caretaken by.
And what's your recollection of the nature of the liaison between the police and, the family in broad terms in that period before the coronial inquest? Was it ongoing? Was it one police officer, or was it someone from the local area command who was in charge of it? What was the nature of the engagement, and how extensive was it?
The nature of the engagement commenced in 1998 by our family initiating contact. A experienced ex-homicide detective took on the case and he looked at the file and decided to take on the case. And from my own experience, I will say that my mother's and my witness testimonies or statements were actually done by the previous constable in the 1993 inquiries. I actually never got to speak or meet Detective Glenn Taylor until 2 minutes at the inquiry when I mentioned before, and I now actually speak to him on the phone and have his phone number, and it's 2026.
And the coronial inquest, did it make any findings? What were the findings of that coronial inquest?
The findings were that a known person within this courtroom, which was actually said, is responsible for the death of Bronwyn Winfield at approximately 9:30 p.m. on May the 16th, 1993, and I refer to the ODPP for prosecution.
And that's a pretty strong recommendation or a pretty strong finding. What happened?
From my understanding and research, I am led to believe that the evidence was poor circumstantially based and no charge would proceed.
So the ODPP declined to proceed on the with the case on the basis of the paucity of evidence.
Yes, and they referred it back to the unit for further investigation.
And was there further investigation? When was it, as the police say, picked up again? When were you made aware that they were looking into it again? When was the contact after that?
When looking at my notes, we would be looking at a 2009 relaunch of Strike Force Chelmsbrook because the initial investigation was called Operation Lumberton.
So there was a new strike force 7 years after the coronial inquest?
Yes.
And was there any outcome in that? Was there any new evidence? Why were you told that there was a new strike force initiated? Was there new learnings that the police had?
I actually can't really answer that question because I was never informed or consulted or had any information shared.
Who was that information shared with?
That would, I would suspect, be my brother, Andrew Reid.
Okay. Colleagues, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I've got some questions. Thanks so much for coming along. It's really appreciated. From my understanding of this case, your sister's husband, John Winfield, misled police about things such as your sister's mental health, and that had an effect of, in a sense, derailing the police investigation. And I think the coroner later criticised the reliance that the police placed on things that he said about her mental health. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
I'd probably like to make a correction is that I would not want to be known to say that Jonathan Winfield was had conducted himself in that manner. But what I can tell you, looking at all the documentation, is that between cups of tea with the detective, they somehow came to the conclusion, and it is recorded, that perhaps Bronwyn Winfield has had a breakdown like her mother, the schizophrenic.
And what do you say about that as a fair representation?
If I have a look at everything and I take into my account my lived experience and my involvement with all the triangulated phone calls that happened between Jonathan Winfield, my mother, me standing with her, and my brother Andrew, is that, yes, the history of my mother's incorrect history, I should say, was actually third-hand explained to Detective Graham Diskin. And yes, Jonathan Winfield is known to have continuously repeated that.
And is it the case that during the re-investigation of the matter that police found no medical evidence to support those claims, basically?
Correct, no medical. Bronwyn had been attending a GP service, and she'd also been heavily engaged in 1993, which I am so impressed with. She was engaged with domestic violence support through the community centre.
Yeah. It seems like an important point in terms of if someone goes missing and their partner is saying things about their mental health that might tend to support some theory that the partner's putting about voluntary disappearance, that police should be generally sceptical about those sort of assertions, because we know how commonly someone's intimate partner is actually the perpetrator of homicide.
Yes, research definitely publishes that, and I have got research continuously going at the moment, and I have also engaged the most leading psychology-based crime specialist professor that has the ear of the Prime Minister, and he is going to be working further with me on Bronwyn's case.
Any questions? Mrs. McDonald.
Sorry. Thank you for your evidence today. What support do you think should be available to families where people have gone missing and the investigation goes for a long time?
Okay, so what I've actually learnt speaking with victim services, they have explained to me how their non-operational arm is not independently operating to its best practice. So they believe they could actually make a lot of changes and improvements and provide better services. They have actually told me that they do not have the ear and the support of the New South Wales Police Force.
So if you could change, say, one procedure or police procedure.
I definitely have one for you.
What would it be? Yeah.
It would be that police, frontline police, are not in charge of triaging and identifying support allocations, because at the moment the current practice, I believe, is that when a traumatic event actually happens, it is up to the detective or officer that's on scene in charge. They don't even have a cheat sheet to follow, and if they get around to it, they get around to it, and if they don't,
they don't.
There we go.
Okay.
And it's not acceptable. And so we actually need allied health, obviously with clearance level, a specialised officer that actually is that interconnector. So I want to see the community framework pillars and practices, multi-agency, innovation. Let's make New South Wales lead. So let's call it New South Wales Search and Care, that actually is a multi-operational arm that supports New South Wales Police Force. Let them get on with their real work.
And in your experience, what made it harder for you than it needed to be?
I did not have, it's a great question. I only had the communication of my brother and Jonathan. So I had two men that were manipulating and controlling me. And I basically booked a plane ticket, and so did Melissa Reid. So it was the two sisters that were the only relatives that actually went to Lennox Head. I was already going with a preconceived safety plan. I was already going to, escort my sister and the girls back to Tasmania at the financial and directions of my grandmother. And I did not have anyone to talk to at all. I didn't know who to go to.
So you'd say your voice as a family member wasn't being listened to?
Continuously. So my voice has only been listened to because I, 8 years ago, went and got Hedley Thomas, who could give me a voice, I then have been tokenised and probably recognised, and now we've all gone back to normal practice.
Yeah. And so what has helped you through this? Like you haven't had support from
Yes.
where you think you should be getting it.
Correct.
So what has
4 years of psychology.
start like research?
Yeah, and going to university and becoming academically informed so that I knew how to make the most informed decisions for my niece Crystal, for my niece Lauren. I know that she's listening even though we can't communicate. And to make sure that I clearly understood what happened to me, because I grew up always putting myself last. I've even done it today with the these reporters that come and talk to you. I don't know how to ask a question that actually comes from me inside. I only know how to fix it.
But by doing the study, you're learning to know what questions to ask.
Yeah. I've learned how to identify with myself.
And to advocate on behalf of your
Yes.
sister and her
Yes.
family.
Yes.
Okay, so so communication, do you think there were missed opportunities in terms of communication, like who police did speak to, who they didn't speak to get the full picture of?
Well, in the 1993 investigation, my opinion is that it was societal pattern behaviours. There was a culture in the Richmond Command. So police were allowed to make their own judgments. They weren't aware of unconscious bias, but you would have thought in 1993 that they would have. In 1998, 1999, Strike Force Chelmsbrook, you still would have actually thought, even though lovely Detective Taylor is a great person, you would have still thought that he would have actually met or spoken to Bronwyn's mother and Bronwyn's sister. And it's not just Bronwyn and I, it's not just Barbara and I, it's also Melissa Reid as well. And then if you look at the cops' running sheets, you will see repeated same language, patterns, sentences stolen from other people's phone calls, and no opportunity to answer a question other than a leading question. And that applies to the 1993 questionings by Diskin, and it also applies to, unfortunately, the 1998. In regards to 2009, and you're talking about Judge George Radmore, never met the man. Megan thinks he's absolutely famous and fabulous. Never met the man. Never met the man. And so here we are today, and I have still had to force the police to actually come and address my mental health. So it doesn't matter if you do a podcast, you still don't get to do an interview. I was falsely taken to Sydney to do an interview, then told, no, you're not doing it. We'll do it another time down the track. Luckily, I understood chain of custody command, and I have actually managed to get my evidence from being contaminated. I now further have more evidence that is actually in my possession that I've had to secure that has still not been picked up. And I actually spoke to Inspector Nigel Warren this morning to let him know that I'm about to talk about that today. Do you want me to talk about it? Do you not want me to talk about it? My brother, don't you dare talk about the case at all costs while you're at the inquiry.
How can you not?
So here I am, and I'm holding another piece of information that I reckon would be very, very helpful.
And my last question, what do you hope is the outcome from this inquiry?
I would actually like to see if the police and the coroner believe that Jonathan Winfield is a suspect in the disappearance of my sister. I cannot understand, and I wanted explained, why can he not have an interview, or why can't he be given an opportunity to interview? I understand that he might have legal advice, but at the end of the day, that person has been irresponsible from the get-go. I have no belongings of my sister. They have all been destroyed. If someone else has them, and they might have pieces of them, why don't they share them? What's that got to do with a murder conviction? Why do belongings have to be destroyed? Why can they not be shared? It just doesn't make sense. There is no compassion whatsoever. Police also hold delicate items and evidence, and they will not explain why they will be released. When I have in writing in 2009 from George Radmore's investigation that those things will be actually returned to me. I don't understand why, and we just want simple language. We don't want trapdoors. There must be a way, and I know of a way, and it's in my submission that you will be getting once I leave the Ballina area. Because of my PTSD, I don't want to publish it until I have left New South Wales.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of
you.
the coronial inquest, were you privy to the brief of evidence? Were you able to see that?
No, I saw the brief of evidence in maybe an email from Andrew in 2020. So then I tried to
So
actually...
that's like nearly 20 years afterwards.
Yeah, and I actually never really got to see it until 2024, to tell you the truth. So I'm so glad that I actually never saw my statements, because now it helped to not contaminate my evidence. So it's actually worked in my favour if there was a positive out of all of this.
And why weren't you able to see it back at the coronial inquest?
One, it would have to be because I'm not a next of kin, and I would have been identified as a stepsister. So I was incorrectly identified with an incorrect surname and an incorrect blood relation, or non-blood related perhaps. So maybe I had a different mother, I think, or something like that. So someone told someone that I was not blood related. I was only related by marriage.
And so therefore you weren't considered a next of kin.
Yes.
And therefore able to see it.
Yes. So I spent $10,000 getting to the coronial inquest with my husband and my child and my pregnancy. And then the next of kin decided to have a memorial service in very short time, and travelling from Hobart continuously up here, it was going to cost another $6,000 in airfares. And so my poor mother and myself, but my poor mother did not get to go to her daughter's service. That is shameful. So I hold two people accountable for that. One, the agency, whatever they're called, or the public prosecutor, or I hold my brother responsible.
And there's been significant public interest in this case for a very, very long time,
Yes.
for nearly 30 years.
33.
33 years. What's your understanding of how that information makes its way into the police? Like, are you aware of information that is held by other members of the public that they've tried to put things to the police, and what's it been like? Does that information exist? Is it coming from the public? And what's been the police's attitude to that information?
It doesn't matter whether I submit evidence or information. It doesn't matter whether a public person does. It cannot be guaranteed. There's no logging that any information's been received or acted on. And the example is whether it's actually a manipulation plan. There is a member of the public that actually believes that they sold an additional piece of property to Jonathan Winfield at a very crucial time. And they provided a receipt to the police in 1993 about this transaction, and still today we actually don't know where that receipt is, but we also do not know if they're following up on that lead.
That's an example that you say of people providing critical evidence to the police. That's not properly accounted for, and you have no understanding whether it's been
there's no chain of command, there's no logging sheet. So at the moment, I've done a new statement. I've got no copy of my statement. I've got, and I'm meant to. I also should have been allocated with a warrant officer or an evidence officer, and also a number. So I've done two statements. And to this day, I have no copies of my 1998 statement or my 1999 statement or my 2025 statement, which went for 13 hours. So we went well into the middle of the night. I've got nothing, and I'm not allowed to have a copy of it.
My understanding is that information did come to light that may have indicated a potential location for remains.
Yes.
How did that happen, and did the police act upon that information?
Well, I wasn't actually allowed to be aware of that information due to the continued control. So I found that information out through the actual search commander later on, that he waited a period of time before releasing it to me that was ethical. And I am aware that a report has been sent to New South Wales Police Force. They will not engage in any conversation on that whatsoever. But just remember, they don't engage on any conversation. So we're not allowed to know. All they keep telling me is that I'm in danger. They have expressed concerns to me that I am in danger and that I should not be a Sally Layden.
Really? Well, please, what do you mean?
I should not be, when I receive information from the public, I should not be handling it whatsoever. I should just be passing it on. But when you pass it on, you actually don't know if it gets there. So at the moment, I am on about day 45 or day 60 maybe, where I'm still waiting to see if an email that I have sent has been received. Not actually acted on, but just received. I wanted to let them know that I was attending. That was part of it. I wanted to let them know that I was going to be conducting some activities. I wanted to show cooperation with them. And I just wanted to know again when my mother's and my sister's letters were going to be returned.
And you're getting very little out of it?
No. So I actually rang. And so over a 25-minute phone call to the desk, 25 minutes, I still do not know, even verbally, if my email has been received. So I cannot understand, as a person that works in the Department of Justice in Tasmania in the Supreme Court, I cannot understand how the homicide unit must be running, because they need registry operations ASAP. You don't need detectives answering the phone to help me work out if my email's been received. Where's the staff?
Thank you.
Just one more from me.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Lawrence.
Is there any specific investigatory steps that you or anyone else that you're aware of in your family have asked the police to do that have not occurred?
Could you just reframe that question for me, sorry?
Yeah, so is there any particular things that you or your family have asked the police to do, or that you think that the police should do in terms of the investigation that hasn't happened that you want to talk about?
Oh, I actually don't know why my Auntie Jan hasn't been interviewed. She's quite ill. She's had pancreatic cancer operations. She hasn't been interviewed. So that's just one example. That just doesn't make sense to me whatsoever. But is it because she's female again? Is it because we're going down another line of inquiry that is not relevant? For all I know is that the line of inquiry that they are going down is becoming very successful. It's on, it's hot, whatever's happening. But that doesn't help the family victims and the co-victims on the other side. So if they were to set up a portal like we have at the Department of Justice in Tassie, you would be able to track, you would be able to leave your detectives alone, you would be able to see progress, you would have agency. If we have agency, the ambiguous loss can actually just calm down a little bit.
I saw something online when I was doing some research about the case about a concrete slab at a property.
Yes.
And it was being suggested that that slab should be examined. Do you know if that's occurred?
No, and there's no way that they would answer me. And my brother won't tell me, even though he's the gatekeeper of probably knows what's going on because he's in the boys' club. So he actually would know. And I'm sorry to actually speak with discrimination and gender bias. I apologise. But if I don't stay angry, because I'm not used to being angry, I will not be able to talk to you. So I have to stay in this mindset because I'm actually a very soft, gentle, compassionate person.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? No. All right. Well, Ms. Marshall, thank you very much for being angry and for coming along and giving your evidence today on behalf of your sister and your family. We deeply appreciate it. You've made some excellent suggestions. We look forward to your submission. Please make sure you do that with your experience,
I will.
both personally and professionally. I'm sure you're going to make recommendations that are going to be of enormous assistance to the inquiry. Again, our deepest sympathies and are with you, and we thank you for taking the time, for coming all this way to give evidence. It's been enormous benefit to the hearing today and to the inquiry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for, putting in. And can I just say, could you please try and stay curious and help us get transparency in some way so that we can get these resources allocated correctly? Because the detectives do actually work really hard.
Thank you. Excellent point. Thank you very much. Can you hear us? Thank you very much for your attendance via video conference this afternoon at our inquiry and hearing. Before we commence, you should have in front of you an oath or affirmation. I just need you to state your name and swear either one of those.
Sure. My name's Karen Elizabeth Robertson, and I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Robertson. Thank you very much for taking the time today to come along and give evidence in regards to the disappearance of your sister, Kylie Ann Schaefer, and also your comprehensive submission. We deeply appreciate that. It was very substantial. So do you have an opening statement you would like to make before we turn to questions?
I do, thank you. So firstly, I would like to thank the committee for their time and consideration of this inquiry. I'd also like to take the time to acknowledge and thank all of the witnesses that have come forward for their loved ones and have lent a voice to those who cannot speak for themselves. My sister, Kylie Ann Schaefer, had just gone to a party with her friends. According to the reports, she was emotional and seemingly depressed, but during the course of the investigation, key facts were overlooked. And my primary concern is that although there are a multitude of inconsistencies and conflicting statements in my sister's case, these were not addressed. Simple alibis were not verified, and various key locations, such as even her home, weren't searched. My hope is that this inquiry will bring to light the lack of resources available to investigators, and that in turn there is a dedicated team to ensure that all missing persons cases are able to be investigated efficiently to achieve better outcomes for all involved. My fear is that the inquiry pushes investigators to chalk up cases to a serial killer, creating a scapegoat for cases where, like my sister's, we, her family and loved ones, believe that she was murdered and probably by someone that she knew. I'd like to address one of the biggest issues and inconsistencies that I've noticed in the time that I've been involved with this awful world of missing persons that I've been living in, which is going on 23 years now, is that there doesn't seem to be a particular formula for any missing person being included in the promotional posters that are released twice yearly since 2004, and there is also a huge inconsistency with rewards being offered. And I know that's only a small part of the picture, but with no framework in place, it means that some families may feel that their missing person isn't of the same stature as another and that other people deserve more help, whereas all missing persons, I believe, should be investigated equally. And I know that is something that needs to be addressed with new protocols and standard operating practices and things like that, and potentially support from other facilities like committees and the such that I know that previous witnesses have mentioned. We need consistency. My sister and others have been overlooked time and time again, while some missing persons have been featured 3 or 4 times on those posters. I won't get into the statistics today, but I've done the research, and there's been some people that have been featured 4 or 5 times. And we have so many people that are missing that it needs to be a little bit more consistent. There's no obvious reason that some cases are more worthy of others. My concern with the rewards is that if it's at the discretion of the investigating officers, then in regional, rural and small communities, it does open up a potential for bias. We don't know who knows who in a small town. Certainly where my sister went missing from, it's a big factor. And if someone doesn't believe that the person deserves a reward or the same exposure as others, then they potentially won't get it for a reason that we may not be aware of. The lack of support by investigators often means that we that are left behind are forced to utilise things like media, social media and the like, and then our motives are questioned, quite often by family and friends of the person that's missing. They think that we are after notoriety or financial compensation, which anybody in our position knows that it's not something that you get. Quite often we're very lucky to even be heard. As part of my submission, I've called for standard operating practices and protocols to be created to help facilitate a more cohesive approach to ensure more interaction with families and less ambiguity of case status. My father passed away having never found out what happened to Kylie and not really having an idea of the status of the case and how it was progressing. I'd love to put to the committee that there is room for potentially a group of individuals that have been affected by the matters relating to this inquiry and similar unsolved missing persons cases to provide feedback on what could be more useful when providing assistance to families. I, for one, would be happy to assist.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Robertson. In your submission, you say that that there's a lackluster approach to
There was, unfortunately.
Yes, to local missing persons. Could you expand on that? What does that mean in your submission and in your sister's case? Could you describe what happened at the time in terms of the reporting and the attitudes and actions of the police at the time?
Absolutely. So in my sister's case, unfortunately, I was living in a completely different region, so the information that I got was third hand anyway. But there was no urgency to report her missing initially by not just the people that were with her, but also there was only one police officer in the town, and so the resources available were very limited.
So the town was it Willawarren? So
Willawarren is where she went missing from.
Yes.
The local police officer was in Bellbrook, which is a neighbouring town.
Yep.
My family was located geographically right in the middle of the two. So the local police officer was in Bellbrook, but being a weekend, being a sole operator in the town, the resources were limited. So not much happened until the Sunday and then the Monday. And she went on I suspect Friday night, but reported Saturday. And I don't think the official report happened until the Sunday. So there was delays and issues from the start, let alone once it all began. So I think the lack of resources is a huge problem with it. But in my sister's case, it became more a case of it was almost like locals weren't seeking out to give information regarding my sister's case. If anyone asked, including asking any police officers, it was more asking if anyone had, oh, did you ever hear anything about that case? It was like they could have been asking about a missing car. It wasn't really anything that was of interest. There's a lot of unspoken gossip in the area, and that's never followed up on. As far as the main town, Kempsey, the police officer that was looking after her case, I spoke to in 2019 after reading the coroner's report. I'd never had access previous. So I started chasing up with the AFP and found out who I had to contact. I had contact with that person for a very short amount of time. And the last time I contacted them asking for an update was 2021. And then 6 months later saying, I haven't heard anything for 6 months. Can I please have an update? I've had nothing since. There is complete lack of interest.
So that was 15 years after your sister disappeared.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
before,
I've had
before we get to that,
very, very little contact.
What about at the time? So your sister disappears on the Friday. There's a police report. At what point did the police take an interest in the matter in terms of it being suspicious that she hadn't turned up? It was either misadventure or something worse.
Never. It was always a case of she ran away. The people that were the witnesses of that were interviewed, so the people that were at the party with her, all indicated that they thought that she was going to commit suicide. So it was almost like everyone was happy with that. And whilst they did do a search, they did, the SES were involved and locals helped look for 4 days, then the search was abandoned. A pair of shoes was found a couple of weeks later, but they just didn't have the resources. When going through the coroner's report, there are a few things that I thought were a bit peculiar, such as one officer mentions that there were drag marks on the side of the creek, but they were of little consequence and found to be unimportant. I would have thought they would have deserved a little bit of more investigation. Her home, the unit that she was renting and sharing with quite a few individuals that were at the party with her and had disagreements with, was never searched. That was never searched. They looked for her as a missing person, but there was never any proactive investigation into it being a potential homicide.
Really, they never, even after many years, never thought that there may be cause to interview some people and to the nature of her relationships with them, if she had disagreements with certain people, or
it was very basic initially. So they spoke to, they were all teenagers, and they spoke to them regarding what happened at the party. But some people weren't interviewed for 2 years. Just after it all happened, some of the people that were there at the time moved interstate, and it wasn't questioned. There was a lot of conflicting statements that I read where two people talk about, I went to person's house for coffee, and the person that they had gone to see said that they had come to the other person's place. It's a direct conflict, but that's not investigated. There are so many conflicting statements and inconsistencies right throughout that were never seemingly chased up. However, the officers that were looking after the case, and I can only talk about my sister's case, obviously, kept being changed. As you go through the coroner's report, it starts off with one person that's in charge, and then it says at the end, I was moved on to other work. and that happens around half a dozen times. So how is there meant to be how is there meant to be consistency if we can't even keep the same officer involved for any decent length of time? So it's just that it wasn't a priority.
And when there finally was a coronial inquest, were there any findings made at that? Did the coroner
Yes.
make a finding as to the manner of death, or if he or she believed your sister was deceased?
So the coronial inquest was completed in 2010, and the findings were that one of three options had happened. It was either death by suicide, death by misadventure, or death by homicide. But in the coroner's opinion, all things led to suicide. Misadventure. That there was no evidence to suggest that she'd committed suicide or that she'd been murdered, and it was most likely just misadventure, something had happened, but they weren't sure what.
And you subsequently were able to get a copy of the brief for that coronial inquest. What was the evidence they were relying on? How comprehensive was that?
It wasn't. In the lead up, and all of the statements that were made was of people that had spoken to her in the few days leading up to the event happening, whatever that event might have been. And then, as I mentioned, some people weren't interviewed till quite an extended time after it. The things that were mentioned were mental health issues, disagreement at the party she attended, and that she was depressed, and that they believed that she was having some sort of a breakdown or schizophrenic episode, and a nurse at the local hospital had mentioned that she should come back to be admitted. But other people that I have spoken to that were with her in the days prior said that there was no indicator of any of that. So it's very conflicting.
In your submission, you say that your sister was in the same. I think I've got this right. Your sister was in the same friend group as Amanda Odell.
No, not the same friend group. There was very similar circumstances. So a couple of weeks after a birthday, going to a party with friends, they could well have known the same people. There's a couple of years in difference in age, but certainly the same area, but the same sort of circumstances. Her friends were the last person to see her, and something happened. They disappeared, but insufficient evidence to, blame any person in particular. And
but Amanda's remains were found.
They were, yes.
Yeah, they were found.
Luckily found. Unfortunately, but luckily, because at least you have some sort of closure and can grieve properly. But the friends, from what I understand, the friends were never investigated. It was always an assumption of someone else being responsible. And I just think it's worthwhile talking to everybody involved, not just assuming one.
And that Amanda Odell was a homicide. It was determined that was a homicide.
Apparently, yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Mr. Lawrence.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ms. Robertson, for your evidence. Much appreciated, and your submission's really helpful. You say in the submission that significant delays occur when regional and rural police are not trained efficiently and are understaffed when it comes to missing persons cases. And we've also been looking at another case where I note the coroner made specific recommendations in that case about the way that homicide investigations are dealt with in regional areas. And I'm just wondering if there's anything you'd like to expand upon in terms of your opinion about how police in regional and rural areas, how well placed they are to respond to these sort of incidences.
Absolutely. I I don't believe, and I actually live in a regional area now and am well aware of surrounding towns not having a police presence at all. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that a single man, or even if there's only a handful of people policing the area, I don't think it's reasonable to expect them to dedicate all of their time to a missing persons case, because obviously you need to dedicate time, resources, and then you can't dedicate anything to protecting the local area. So it's completely unreasonable to believe that they can investigate a missing persons case or a homicide effectively when their attention may be pulled elsewhere, and, you know, quite reasonably so.
Yeah.
But you can't be everything to everyone if you're a sole person operating in a town of 2,000. You can't. You can't, let alone a town of, you know, of even 100, which is what we were talking about at the time with Kylie's case.
Yeah.
There's still local business that happens. There's still, you know, crime that happens, and even just normal everyday police business that has to happen. And I don't believe it's fair and reasonable to expect one person to be able to do everything. And that's where I thought potentially a committee or some sort of team that is solely dedicated to homicide and or missing persons. I know homicide is its own entity, but missing persons not so much. I don't think it's reasonable to have that expectation on any police officer.
You talk in your submission, and I'm just trying to find it, the
Sure.
part of it, but you talk about you think there should be a standard criteria for determining when a reward should be offered, and I guess how much the
Absolutely.
reward should be. And that's something
Yeah,
else
absolutely.
that we took some evidence this morning about from a gentleman who essentially was suggesting that there was some arbitrary nature to the amount of rewards that are offered in particular cases. And I'm just wondering if you wanted to expand upon that.
Well, I think first of all, I think having some cases like my sister's that has never had a reward offered, and it's never been up for discussion, and other cases where substantial rewards are offered, and then some where a paltry sum is offered in the opinions of most. I think being so inconsistent, first of all, you lose faith in the system because there's no financial motivation for someone to come forward, because in the case of small towns in particular, if I come forward and I say, I know that Joe Citizen did XYZ, I then have to leave that area. I have to, because I'm no longer safe, particularly if it was someone local. So I need some sort of financial motivation to be able to relocate and disappear, because I can't rely on rely on the police to protect me for doing the right thing. And if that person is already deceased and I know they're deceased, why do I put myself at risk unless I know I can move and be safe? I think that's basic. The consistency, though, is an issue, because it's why is one person more important than another? It's ridiculous to think that one person's information is worth $50,000 and another's is worth $1 million or $500,000 or $100,000. I think it's strange that there is such a gap. It wouldn't matter if all of them were 50,000 or all of them were $1 million, as long as there's some form of consistency and some framework for when it's introduced, such as, do you offer it 3, 6, 12 months, 5 years, 10 years, when?
Yeah.
But certainly there needs to be some sort of framework in place and consistency.
Yeah.
Mrs. Robertson, you talk about in your submission in section 6 recommendations, and certainly listening to your evidence now, part of the problem that you're talking about is a lack of consistency in relation to reporting.
Yes.
For example, you talk about establish clearer national protocols, fund specialist family support liaison officers, improve access to real-time information. I think that one's a very interesting one. And develop culturally appropriate missing persons resources. Do you want to expand on especially the last one, what culturally resource expansion you're talking about?
So obviously, missing person, being a missing person or someone being murdered or disappearing, there's no bias. It can happen to any one of us at any time, regardless of race or beliefs or identity. And I think it's really important that in the case of, for example, Indigenous persons, there is a huge inconsistency with reporting when it's well known that the images and names of people that have gone missing or potentially have been murdered or have passed, that it's well known that that is problematic, and it certainly needs to have some more consistency. I know there's been recent cases where that has been a huge issue for the families left behind, but it's not just that. I think the families have to be more involved with it being appropriate in nature. That quite often there's inconsistencies in the way the case is addressed, the way the case is sent through media outlets, and the way that it's reported on.
I think it's interesting that you don't actually criticise the police in those recommendations, but what you are talking about is a more open process and a more real-time process.
Well, I know that the police have their media out. I know the police have their media team, and I know they do what they can. But I think that the only thing I would criticise from that perspective is maybe more caution needs to be used when naming people of different cultural backgrounds when it may be against their culture if the person's deceased.
But what about European culture? I understand the sensitivity in relation to Indigenous cultural mention, but what about, our ordinary European cultural approach to things?
Well, I think that there needs to be transparency. I think that we need to make sure that there's no speculation. So one of the biggest things that I've noticed with the average case, if we're saying European as being Caucasian and the average looking person, I suppose, then I think one of the big problems that I have noticed is that the cases are reported on. If there's some sort of press conference, then there seems to be an indicator that family are involved. It doesn't seem to be clear enough to prevent speculation that near family are involved in the disappearance. It happens a lot recently with parents and other relatives of children that go missing being not implied or accused, so to speak, but it not being said that there's no way of protecting them that I've seen so far. There's always a little bit of ambiguity saying that there's no one of interest, but they don't say anything about the parents or grandparents or whatever, and it leaves them open to attack.
I mean, it's pretty clear from the evidence we've been getting from family members, both today and at our previous inquiry, that there seems to be a haphazard approach to that.
A little bit, yeah.
With that?
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
Mrs. McDonald.
Thank you. You mentioned the number of, say, investigating officers as a not a good thing. How did that affect your confidence in the investigation?
Well, the issue that I had personally, being involved only remotely, was that I was contacted by an officer early on, and then that person disappeared. And I wasn't contacted ever again until I reached out to the AFP in 2019 and got a call back. And the person that called me was the current officer on the case, to the best of my knowledge, and they didn't know who I was.
So no handover between...
Nothing.
Yeah, okay.
Nothing. And I'm not the first point of contact, and I understand that. But if you are investigating a case, I would assume then it is your business to know who the family members are. And the words used by the officer was, I don't even know who you are. You're not on my list.
So then,
It was absurd.
yeah, that is absurd. And so, what information did your family most need but struggle to obtain?
I think the biggest thing that's lost by investigative officers is that no update is an update. Even if you are calling to say, we haven't had anything new pop up, do you know anything? Have you heard anything? Because one of the things that I didn't mention in my submission, because I tried to keep it procedural, is that I provided thousands of pages of inbox messages that I have received since starting a support page for my sister on Facebook in 2008. Thousands of messages that I've received saying, this is what happened, this is how it happened, this is who was involved. And being the person that I am, I have screenshotted every single solitary message and saved them. I provided that to the police officer at the time and have not even had any feedback at all, nothing. I posted hard copies at her request and have never heard anything ever again. How could I not lose confidence? It's unfortunate, and I'm pretty confident that I wouldn't be the only person experiencing that.
And is that why you say that there should be a dedicated, say, family officer for these cases?
I think there needs to be a dedicated liaison, absolutely. It would take the pressure off the investigator. They could be free to do their work, and then whoever, if there was a team of people that were some sort of intermediary, they could say, hey, just letting you know, for this quarter, this year, this period of time, anything would be better than nothing. This is the current update. Have you got anything for us? Is there anything you'd like to know? No, yes, great. And then you could move on. Because we're all sitting here screaming and trying to get help. And not only are we falling on deaf ears from a police perspective, but our families question our motives, and we can't get the traction that we need, and all we need is an update. We just need to know that our missing person is valid, is still being looked for. So it's very difficult.
No, and if there could be, say, one procedural change that would have made a difference for your sister Kylie, what would you say that would be, if there is one?
Procedurally, I would think it would be transparency. The biggest problem that I have found throughout this time is there is a tremendous lack of transparency with where the case is at and what is needed. I've had a huge amount of conflicting information from not just the officer at the time, but also my sister's mum, my stepmother, who would have a conversation with me, tell me that, I spoke to the officer recently, and I was shocked because I haven't heard anything for 5 years. I thought they dropped off the planet, but no, they're in the community. So there's no transparency. There just needs to be some sort of consistent contact, however infrequent, even if it was a yearly call to touch base, say, hey, this is where we're at. It would give us an opportunity to be able to help as well and say, well, this is what I've got for you, because we can get a lot more through social media than they may have gotten by asking.
And what would you hope from this inquiry? What would you like to see as the outcome, or from your perspective anyway?
From my perspective, 3 things: transparency, across the board with cases. So if you are one of the family members that actually wants the information, because some elect not to, if you want the information and you're not a person of interest, obviously, that you can obtain the transparency as far as where is the case at? Is it currently being investigated, or is it dormant? Is it not being investigated but it's open? Is it closed? Where is it at? Standard operating procedures for missing persons as far as how it's investigated and the touch points. And lastly, consistency around not just media presence such as Missing Persons Week, etc., but rewards. So I would ask for standard operating practices regarding the missing persons, how they're handled, how the media is handled, and rewards, and as I said, transparency.
Thank you, Mrs. Robertson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McDonald and Mrs. Robertson. I don't think there's any more questions. No, thank you so much, Mrs. Robertson, for your excellent submission. Our condolences on the disappearance and the situation you and your family are in regarding your sister Kylie Ann. Our deepest sympathies and our gratitude to you for taking the time today to give evidence and making a very, very constructive submission also. It'll be something that we certainly will be considering in detail and in due case making findings and recommendations about. If there's any other information you wish to provide in due course, please contact the Secretariat. If we have any other questions of you, which we may well, we will be in contact as well. But thank you for your attendance, evidence, and submission. We deeply appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.